Chapter 666. If Sir Bai had known that he was Supreme Cloud, he would never have sent only 16 men to assassinate him. It would have been reasonable for Sir Nian to do it himself. Why then? Or rather, when was the time to confirm his identity as Supreme Cloud? Yin Yang felt as if his vision was shrouded in mist. In spite of this, he had a clear feeling that as long as this fog was cleared, the sky before him would be clear, there would be no more obstacles. But how was he going to do it? He looked at the Go game in front of him and caressed the Go record in his hand. His brows were locked in a frown, and he remained silent for a long time. On the other side, Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou combined their swords and dashed down from the top of a mountain. Ling Xiaozui carried Feng Xianga while Du Guchou carried Heaven's Inquisition, Gu Chaoyang. Both Feng Xianga and Heaven's Inquisition were already covered in blood and wounds. Gu Chaoyang could still stay conscious, but Feng Xianga was already unconscious and had lost consciousness. We must dash to the bottom of the mountain. Heaven's Inquisition's voice was weak. The entire forest below can obscure the heavens. Only by dashing there will we have a chance of survival, only then will we have the right to talk about anything else. Du Guchou's chest was covered in blood as well. He nodded in agreement and increased his speed. Previously, the four experts had the upper hand in Mr. Nian and the mysterious black-clothed man, Yang Canghai, and had even set up a tracking plan. How could they be at a disadvantage now? Moreover, they seemed to be in an extremely disadvantageous state of being pursued. The answer was actually very simple. There were 17 to 18 silhouettes behind the two of them. Each of the pursuers was like a demonic god that had emerged from hell, pursuing them relentlessly. The combined aura of this group of people stirred the wind and clouds in the sky into pieces. Along the path of death, where the sword energy that was casually waved past, thousands of feet of mountains crumbled and the ground cracked. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou sprinted forward as if their lives depended on it. Green light encircled them. Although they were in dire straits, there was not the slightest hint of panic or impatience. The long sword in his hand continued to emit sword chi, blocking all of the enemy's pursuing sword chi. His feet were not in the slightest bit messy, and he did not slow down in the slightest. From beginning to end, his movements were as smooth as flowing water. This speed was truly fast to the extreme, indescribable. At that moment, the two of them moved in two different directions and finally converged once again. This way. Ling Xiaozui was the first to shoot out like an arrow. This time, he charged forward at top speed, seeking to reach the destination in the shortest amount of time possible. He had truly expended all of his cultivation base into speed. The reason Ling Xiaozui dared to do so was because Du Guchou was behind him, blocking all the attacks that were aimed at both of them with all his might without missing a single one. The 17 to 18 people who were chasing after them were impressive. Even with Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou's astounding cultivation base, they could not shake off the pursuers even when they exerted their full strength. Of course, the enemy's relentless pursuit and relentless attacks could not close the distance, nor could they break through Du Guchou's defense. Along the way, the mountains collapsed and the ground cracked, creating a scene of devastation. Although both Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou were safe for now, they still felt like they were in a sorry state. It had been a long time since they were in such a sorry state. It was a disgrace to their status as the unrivaled experts of 2 generations. This is strange. Ling Xiaozui still had the time to joke, Heaven's Inquisition, we were moving together with you, but we were ambushed as well. Isn't this unexpected? Where's the heavens will that you always talk about? Gu Chaoyang was flushed. The mountain they were on was covered in formations. It was a massive, all-encompassing setup that blinded Heaven's will. How could I have predicted that there would be someone in this world who could come up with such a grand setup? It's not the fault of the battle. Du Guchou guffawed and said, there's a limit to one's strength. Today, I finally know that Heaven's Inquisition doesn't know everything. Actually, being tricked once in a while is a fresh experience as well. You can learn from the past. Ling Xiaozui guffawed. Indeed, indeed. It's a pity that Feng Xiang'e was completely tricked this time. He was beaten to the point that he almost died. What a tragedy. Gu Chaoyang was flushed as he said, perhaps it's really heaven's will. Nonsense. If it's really heaven's will, heaven must have done it on purpose. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou scoffed at the same time. How can you still talk about heaven's will? Both of them were joking, but there was still something strange in their hearts. Perhaps the art of being blinded by heaven's will was exceptionally lofty and unattainable in the eyes of an ordinary person, but these few men were far more knowledgeable and experienced than an ordinary person. They did not think too much of it, each of them was aware of what was going on. The strange thing was, how did the Four Seasons Tower know that they were coming? They had gone through many things along the way to reach this place. It was not an easy task. Now that they were here, the four of them were surrounded before they could even make a move. 18 people appeared from 18 different directions, surrounding the four of them tightly like dumplings, without leaving any gap. Furthermore, it was not a big deal to be blinded or even to be surrounded. There was always a reason for everything to happen. However, what truly concerned Ling Xiaozui and Ling Xiaozui, or rather, shocked them, was that the cultivation base of the 18 people who had formed the encirclement was actually on par with their own. The reality was more sensational. It was a ghastly sight to behold. Since when had there been so many pinnacle experts in this world? Why had they never heard of them before? Looking at this lineup, it seemed that their status as the world's #1 expert of the previous 2 generations could not be considered to be fully deserved, but in reality. Facing such a lineup, the four of them had no intention of fighting recklessly. Fighting recklessly would be courting death. Besides, they truly had no intention of accomplishing the goal that they had set. It was more appropriate for them to turn and break out of the encirclement to escape. Gu Chaoyang's cultivation base was slightly weaker, so he was successfully intercepted during his escape. If Du Guchou had not been paying attention to his condition and performed the art of man and sword as one to save him, he would have been hacked to death by the flurry of swords. In spite of this, he was still gravely injured and could no longer fight. As for Feng Xiang'e, he was worse off. His cultivation base was the weakest among the four of them. When they had attacked Liang Canghai previously, he had been the one who had suffered the most damage. What was even more unfortunate was that he was the leader of this operation, the frontmost position among the four of them. When it was time to retreat, he naturally became the one to cover the rear. However, Feng Xiang'e could not fulfill the task of covering the rear, be it his physical condition or his actual cultivation base. He could not handle any one of the opponents, not even one-on-one. Therefore, it had not been more than 2 encounters before he had been struck by a saber, a sword, and a few punches and kicks. His body was almost torn apart. Ling Xiaozui had used all his might to forcefully break through the 10 people's encirclement, only then did he manage to carry Feng Xiang'e out. They had fled for their lives all the way here. This ambush is too unexpected, too abrupt. It shouldn't be. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou were veterans who had been in the martial world for who knew how many years. Exchanging glances, no one spoke a word as they continued to flee. As they spoke, the two of them had already pierced straight through the white mist like meteors chasing after the moon. Behind the layer of white mist was a cliff that was thousands of meters tall. Not to mention jumping, just looking at it would cause one's heart to tremble and their souls to leave their bodies. However, the two of them didn't hesitate in the slightest and jumped straight down. The 18 pursuers behind them were hot on their heels. They landed uniformly at the edge of the cliff but did not continue their pursuit. This should be enough, right? Almost. Let's go back then. Chapter 667. At the bottom of the cliff. Du Guchou was panting heavily. Ling Xiaozui was equally exhausted, but his condition was even worse than Du Guchou's. He had fought the combined attacks of 10 men alone, and it had greatly exceeded his body's limit. Although he was not completely exhausted, his vitality had been greatly damaged, and it would be difficult for him to go on any further. Almost every breath he took carried the scent of blood. Let's heal them first. Otherwise, They won't be able to hold on before we get back, said Ling Xiaozui. All right. Taking out the medicinal pills, they condensed their qi into water at the bottom of the cliff and poured it into their mouths. Gu Chaoyang moaned, I can drink it myself. Ugh, in spite of this, both of them forced it down his throat without a word. Then, both of them rested for a while. When they felt that their strength had recovered, they fled again with the other 2 men. They ran 3,000 miles and found a secluded cave to hide in. We can take a good rest here. Finding a flat spot to put the 2 men down, Du Guchou and Ling Xiaozui exchanged a look. Both of them chatted softly as they went out. I don't have much medicine left. Do you have any good medicine for internal injuries? I don't have much with me either. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Even with the 4 of us working together, we still ended up like this. Forget it. You go left and I'll go right. Let's search along the way. This forest is unusually hidden and treacherous. Perhaps there are undiscovered treasures of heaven and earth. Let's try our luck. All right, we'll try our luck now. After walking out, both of them did not go left and I'll go right as promised. Instead, they took a detour and came together again, acting suspiciously. The place where they came together was dozens of miles away from the cave. Who do you think it is? Du Guchou looked grim. What do you think? Ling Xiaozui was hesitant as well. It's hard to say. It could be anyone is suspicious. Du Guchou sighed. I haven't thought about it before. Now that I think about it, there have been too many coincidences since this incident. These 2 fellows. How long has it been since they last appeared? Why did they suddenly appear this time? Ling Xiaozui mused, if one of them had spent so much effort to set up such a trap, would we be able to escape from it? There's no need for that. Du Guchou said faintly, the moment we realized that we were ambushed, both of us were quite wary of each other. For people like us to set up an ambush, it has to be based on one premise: we won't run. Anything else is meaningless. Don't tell me you didn't guard against a sneak attack when you were carrying someone on your back? We both know this in our hearts. Even if they really launched a sneak attack, it would only cause some trouble and light injuries. It's impossible for it to be fatal. I agree with you. If we don't have them to drag us down, we can work together with our swords and we won't be afraid of any assassination. Don't be so optimistic. Don't you know that those 18 people have the power to keep all of us here? Ling Xiaozui sucked in a breath. Instead, I find it incomprehensible that such a painstaking ambush has allowed us to charge out. At least, it's much better than the worst-case scenario that I had predicted. Du Guchou completely agreed with Ling Xiaozui's words. That's right. But the truth is that we've charged out and all 4 of us have survived. We've even learned of their true capabilities. This is already a great gain. Why is that so? If we take this as an argument, then it doesn't seem like the other party was ambushing us. Instead, it seems like they were delivering important information to us. It's interesting and intriguing. Both of them pondered for a long time, but they still could not figure out the crux of the matter. They should not have been ambushed, but they had. Since they had been ambushed and the other party's combined abilities were so strong, it should not have been so easy for them to escape. Yet, the truth was that they had done so easily. All of this was filled with too many illogicalities and paradoxes. How many questions and secrets were hidden in it? Both of them had no idea. In spite of this, one thing was certain: the other party definitely had an objective. But what was this objective? Although it might not be them, we must never let our guard down in the future. Any carelessness can cause us to lose everything. This was the common understanding that both of them had at the moment. We've been in the martial world for so many years, but we've actually been tricked once. We've embarrassed ourselves enough. If we're going to be tricked again, we can just slit our own throats. Du Guchou chuckled. I'm actually very interested to know what other arrangements the other party has made. After setting up such a grand game of chess, it'll be meaningless if the follow-up isn't exciting enough. Ling Xiaozui was not as optimistic as he said, "Don't let your guard down. The other party's objective is unknown, but their capabilities are terrifyingly strong. It's a lineup that can really kill us. If either Heaven's Inquisition or Feng Xiang'e is the mole, he'll definitely try his best to lead us to the path he wants. On the other hand, if both of them are innocent, the other party will still have other plans to advance their goals." Ling Xiaozui said seriously, "All in all, we have to be more careful along the way. We have to be alert at all times." Of course. When both of them returned, each of them had a handful of spiritual medicine from the mountain in their hands. Then, they went about their duties, taking care of one each, treating their wounds, and administering blood. After some time, Feng Xiang'e and Gu Chaoyang woke up one after another. Both of them looked aggrieved and miserable. Feng Xiang'e began to grumble at Gu Chaoyang, full of resentment. "Sir Heaven's Inquisition, you're known as the best fortune teller, knowing 5,000 years in the past and 5,000 years in the future. How could you lead us into such a trap? No one else can do this." Gu Chaoyang defended himself with a flushed face. "I've tested each of us before we came. There's no sign of a bloody disaster, let alone a life-threatening one. Does this situation count as fitting?" Feng Xiang'e was enraged, baring his teeth. "Fitting my *SS. Let me ask you, what is a bloody disaster? Look at me, is there a piece of flesh left unharmed? Wasn't this a huge bloody disaster? Do we have to lose our heads to be considered a bloody disaster?" Gu Chaoyang was tongue-tied. After some time, he argued, "We're not dead, so our lives aren't in danger. Is that wrong?" Feng Xiang'e's rage grew. "If Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou hadn't risked their lives, would we have survived?" Gu Chaoyang's eyes darted around as he said, "Turning misfortune into fortune is a good thing. Do you know that? Also, we should thank someone for saving our lives first." Feng Xiang'e opened his mouth but choked. "Did you thank them?" he asked angrily. He then turned to Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou and said solemnly, "Brothers, thank you. I'll get both of you a few pots of good wine to drink when I get back." Ling Xiaozui chortled. "I'll be waiting then. I'm drooling just thinking about the god of wine's fine brew. I've had a little of it before, and it's lingering in my dreams lately." Du Guchou smiled as well. His gaze when he looked at Gu Chaoyang was tinged with chilliness. Chapter 668. Feng Xiang'e had done so, grumbling and acting so righteously. In the eyes of others, it was obvious that he was innocent. Furthermore, he had indeed brought out many rare wines. With Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou's experience, there was no one else who could have done this. It was indeed the god of wine who had done it. On the other hand, Heaven's Inquisition, Gu Chaoyang, had not displayed any ability related to the legend of Heaven's Inquisition until now. An expert who claimed to be omniscient had failed to divine the trap ahead of him and claimed that he had been shielded from Heaven's will when he entered, yet he still could not divine it. Up until now, he had only been making excuses without any concrete evidence. He was highly suspicious. "Let's rest here for a few days and recover," Ling Xiaozui said with a smile. "We'll go back when it's about time." Feng Xiang'e asked, "Go back? Where can we go back to?" Ling Xiaozui chuckled. "Of course we have to go back to Tiantang City. There are still things to be done there, especially since we have a lot of things there as well." Heaven's Inquisition nodded and said, "That's right. It's necessary to return to Tiantang City." Du Guchou smiled faintly and said faintly, "However, the incident this time was unexpected. We came in high spirits, intending to completely dismantle the Four Seasons Tower. I didn't expect the Four Seasons Tower to have hidden so many pinnacle experts. When we were ambushed just now, it was truly a shock to this old man." Ling Xiaozui sighed as well. "It's not that the Four Seasons Tower doesn't want to kill you, but if they really wanted you dead, you would have taken at least half of the 18 people today. The Four Seasons Tower has gone through so much to hide so many experts. They must be planning something big. How could they lose them in a battle with you? Dugu Cho chuckled and said, you don't have to be so humble. It's not that the Four Seasons Tower doesn't want to kill you, but if the Four Seasons Tower really wanted to kill you, at least half of the 18 people here today would have to be taken away by you. The Four Seasons Tower has gone through so much effort to hide so many experts, they must be planning something big. How could they lose them in a battle with you? Ling Xiaozui thought about it and said, that makes sense. Dugu Cho asked casually, Heaven's Inquisition, listening to Mr. Nian's conversation with you, there must be some history between you and them. I wonder if you know anything about the Four Seasons Tower's people or have foretold anything? Don't tell me you don't know anything about this. These words were uncontrollably thorny. Gu Chaoyang wore a bitter expression as he said, I've been imprisoned by Mr. Nian for many years. My knowledge of the Four Seasons Tower's people, objects, and resources is shallow. As for divination, I've actually done it when I woke up just now. I can confirm that the group of people has returned and are hiding in the mountain once again. I've mentioned the mountain briefly before. There's a setup in the mountain that can shield the heavenly oracle. My divination is completely useless, Dugu Cho chuckled and said, in other words, as long as they're on that mountain, you won't be able to divine them, right? Gu Chaoyang sighed and nodded. Yes. He knew that it was inappropriate, but he had never expected such a place to exist in this world. Dugu Cho smiled faintly, but there was a tinge of mockery in his smile. Ling Xiaozui frowned and said in a low voice, the Four Seasons Tower is indeed formidable. We've still underestimated the legendary unrivaled tower in the world. Feng Xiang'a snorted and leaned into Gu Chaoyang to say, Heaven's Inquisition, please divine when this old man will die. Gu Chaoyang grimaced. Feng Xiang'a, we've just escaped from danger and you're just standing there in a daze. Don't you have anything good to divine? Dugu Cho said, how is this Wrigley? We should be very concerned about matters of life and death. Now that we're caught unprepared and the situation is changing subtly, with your divine foretelling here, when are we going to wait if we don't seize the opportunity to hear about it? Quick, help Feng Xiang'a. I think this fellow's life force has been severely depleted. Together with his previous injuries, I don't think he has many years left to live. Feng Xiang'a chided jokingly, Dugu Cho, you old B*****starred. You're older than me. Why don't you say that you don't have many years left to live? Dugu Cho guffawed and urged, divine quickly, divine quickly. I've long heard that Heaven's Inquisition's divination is unparalleled in this world, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. It's a shame. If it doesn't work today, we won't let you go. Gu Chaoyang was helpless, looking at Ling Xiaozui pleadingly. Ling Xiaozui looked at him for a while and said, if it's inconvenient or inauspicious, just don't say it out loud. Gu Chaoyang chuckled and said, if so, let me take a look. He studied Feng Xiang'a's face with rapt attention, studying him from head to toe. Feng Xiang'a still wore a disdainful smile as he glanced sideways at Gu Chaoyang. However, the more Gu Chaoyang looked at Feng Xiang'a's face, the more perplexed he looked. After some time, he shook his head as if to shake off the dizziness, then a deep frown formed on his face. This isn't right. Gu Chaoyang was already screaming in his heart, full of doubts, but he did not show it on his face. He was only deep in thought. People like Gu Chaoyang had always had a habit of reading the faces of the people he came into contact with, whether they were useful or not. After that, he would bury the information in his heart. Those who asked would pay a certain price, and once they were satisfied, they would give some vague advice. It could be said that they were pointing out the right path, or that they were deliberately mystifying, but it was hard to come to a conclusion. During this period of time, Gu Chaoyang had read the faces of Ling Xiaozui, Dugu Cho, and Feng Xiang'a so many times that he was familiar with them. However, looking at Feng Xiang'a's face this time, Gu Chaoyang was taken aback. Why has Feng Xiang'a's face changed? Gu Chaoyang's heart was in turmoil. Looking at his physiognomy, although he still has a long life ahead of him, he'll stop at a few decades to 100 years at most. It's inevitable that he'll die. But why does it look like his physiognomy has changed? With such exuberant vitality, he might not die even after a few thousand years. What's wrong with him? Could it be that I've seen wrongly? Or has Feng Xiang'e been hiding his strength? But he's heavily injured now, how can he hide his strength? This is impossible. It doesn't make sense. Could it be someone else? No, it's still impossible. This aura, this sense, it's impossible that it's someone else. Gu Chaoyang studied Feng Xiang'e's face for a long time, bewildered, not speaking for a long time. Feng Xiang'e snorted and said, "Why? Don't tell me that I'm going to die soon. It's too inauspicious, so you're too embarrassed to say it?" As he spoke, Gu Chaoyang snorted as well, lifting his head to look at Feng Xiang'e's face. Just as he was about to speak, he was stunned again. This was because the extremely rich vitality that Feng Xiang'e had exuded earlier had vanished completely. He looked like an old man at the end of his life. No matter how hard he tried to maintain it, he would definitely die within 100 years. Gu Chaoyang was stunned. He had never seen such a physiognomy in his entire life. It could actually change, changing back and forth. If I were to show it to you, won't I be ruining my Heaven's Inquisition's reputation? Gu Chaoyang shook his head. Your face is too strange. I can't understand it. I admit that I'm untalented, all right? The three of them snorted in unison. Gu Chaoyang snorted as well, tilting his head nonchalantly. He glanced at Du Guchou and Ling Xiaozui's faces and was shocked again. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou's faces had turned black, looking even worse than Feng Xiang'e's dying face. Gu Chaoyang could not help but be shocked as he murmured to himself. What's wrong with these two? Why are there so many strange things happening today when I read their faces? Looking at the complexion of these two people, it's obvious that they've been schemed against, but I can't tell who schemed against them or how they schemed against them. But before I went up the mountain, I specially took a look at them in order to predict the good and bad luck of this trip, and there was no such situation. If they've been tricked since the beginning, how could I not have seen it? However, if they've only been tricked now after being ambushed, yet there's clearly no outsider near them, who could it be? Gu Chaoyang suddenly shuddered at the thought. This was a terrifying situation to contemplate. Meeting in Hangzhou. Can't return until the 21st. I'm afraid I can only write one chapter these few days, and it might even be broken. There's no helping it, I can only fill it up when I get back. Chapter 669. Thinking of this, Gu Chaoyang could not help recalling the stalking plan. From the beginning to the end, it had been seamless and flawless. The idea, the plan, the beginning, the ambush, the stalking, the entire journey had been smooth sailing. Everything had been top secret. How could they have been ambushed? Furthermore, they had been ambushed after Heaven's will was shielded. This was an ambush that had been planned for a long time. Why? What was the root cause? At the very least, there was one thing that he could be sure of, and it was that the enemy knew of his existence since the beginning. The enemy knew that so long as his divination ability was present, then ordinary arrangements would be unable to be effective. So, the enemy had to conceal the workings of the heavens and interfere with his ability to make deductions in order to set up a trap and kill him. However, how had the other party been so sure of his movements? Just the precise timing of the attack was already a huge mystery. Gu Chaoyang's thoughts raced as he suddenly guffawed. Actually, everyone's physiognomy is very good. Each of them looks like they won't die even if they wanted to. He was joking, but his heart was heavy. The situation before him was definitely unusual. There had to be something amiss. Gu Chaoyang could not help recalling Du Guchou's repeated questioning of him and the change in his aura. It looked like he was suspecting him. As for Feng Xiang'e, he looked generous, yet he was complaining, furious, and telling fortunes. Was he trying to push all the suspicion onto him? Then, I'll have to think about it carefully. Gu Chaoyang glanced at Ling Xiaozui and then at Du Guchou. A relaxed smile hung on his face, but he had made up his mind. To get rid of Feng Xiang'e, I'll need to find an ally between these two to hope to get out of this predicament. Otherwise, even if I know that the other party is playing tricks, I won't have any evidence to expose them. It'll only backfire if I try to defend myself. Therefore, I can't act recklessly now. He thought about it and said, this hill of the Four Seasons Tower must be where the greatest secret lies. However, there's something strange. Mr. Nian, who came back with the injured patient, the two of them weren't among the 18 people. If we calculate it this way, there are 20 experts from the Four Seasons Tower who can fight Brother Ling and Brother Degu alone. Gu Chaoyang said thoughtfully, it's even more illogical to have a lineup of 20 pinnacle experts in this world. After all, everyone's strength was about the same. Who could convince the masses? Therefore, there must be one or a few existences who have the strength to easily crush these people. Otherwise, this organization would have collapsed long ago. If that's the case, Gu Chaoyang said in a low voice, the situation doesn't look good. If Gu Chaoyang had thought of this, how could Ling Xiaozui and Du Guchou not have? They sighed softly as well. Rest for 3 days, then return at full speed. Ling Xiaozui came to a swift conclusion. No matter what, Yun Yang had to know about this as soon as possible. Because according to their current strength, their lives could be in danger at any moment. If such an important piece of news could not be passed on, there would be endless troubles in the future. Tiantang City. Yun Yang was already preparing for the next step of his plan. The civil and military ministers. The civil minister, Sir Bai, was dead. Where was Wu Xiang? Could Wu Ying have committed suicide as well? It was the dead of the night again. A gust of wind that had not been seen for a long time quietly drifted out of the residence of King Yun and drifted away. The empire of Yutong's most important military base, the Board of Military. It was an independent courtyard. This small courtyard was surrounded by dense pines and cypresses. They were arranged closely together and densely packed together. It was not only outside the courtyard, but even inside the courtyard was filled with cypress trees. Each of the pines and cypresses here was of a certain age, towering into the sky. The overlapping canopies of the trees covered the sky above the courtyard completely. Even when it was noon, when the sun was at its brightest, there were barely any rays of light that penetrated through. Therefore, the entire courtyard had always been eerily eerie throughout the years. As a result, all the decisions made in this courtyard were tinged with an eerie sense of coldness. Fortunately, everyone who passed by the courtyard was a hot-blooded warrior who had been through hundreds of battles. They were all courageous people who did not mind the eerie atmosphere at all. Moreover, after years of being used to it, everyone who passed by this place immediately recognized the atmosphere as the specialty of this place. The courtyard occupied a considerable amount of land, but there was only one person working in it. It would have been a bit of a waste of resources for him to occupy this huge courtyard alone, but not a single person in the Board of Military questioned it. The reason was simple, it could even be described as crude. It was because this person was the most efficient in doing things. No one could compare to him. No matter what kind of strategy or tactic it was, as long as it was passed through the hands of the person in this courtyard, there would at least be a 30% chance of winning. One should never underestimate the 30% chance of winning. The battlefield was ever-changing, and it was rare for someone to have more than 60% chance of winning. This 30% chance of winning was often the key to turning the tide of the battle or even securing the victory. Furthermore, the 30% chance of winning must not be forgotten, it was at least. Yes, the person in this courtyard was of such a high level. What was more, the people in this courtyard did not fight for fame or wealth. They did whatever work was available, and they were the best at whatever work they could do. If they were promoted, they would be promoted. If they were transferred, they would be transferred. They would do whatever they were told to do, and they would just work in this courtyard every single day. After so many years of silent dedication, they had finally achieved a lofty prestige that few in the Board of Military could match. Wu Ying. Apart from this courtyard, his figure would not appear in any other realm. Everyone who passed by this courtyard would always look at him with fear and respect. It was as if at the end of their line of sight was the sinister and cold fellow in the courtyard who looked like a ghost from hell. He was also looking at them with eyes that seemed to be emitting will-o'-the-wisps. Of course, ordinary people wouldn't be able to enter such a courtyard, but those who were qualified to enter didn't really want to. Everyone who had entered before would have the same thought. If it wasn't necessary, I don't want to pass through here again. Next time, let someone else do it. Therefore, this place was silent most of the time. Even the graveyard was not as quiet as this place. However, this night, the people in the courtyard not far away seemed to hear strange noises coming from this courtyard. It sounded like someone was letting out a strange sigh, one long and one short. It was as if they were weeping and complaining, like a group of ghosts letting out low voices. Chapter 670. Then, without warning, smoke rose from the yard, accompanied by the smell of incense and candles. There was also the smell of strong alcohol. It seemed like Sir Wu was paying his respects to someone. Everyone in the military was a veteran of the battlefield. How could they not understand what was going on when the smell of incense and wine wafted over and the smoke curling up in spirals? Everyone was well aware of it, but another mystery arose. This was because, over the years, thousands of generals from the Board of Yutong's Board of War had perished on the battlefield, but Sir Wuing had never been seen paying tribute to anyone. He seemed to always be cold, as if all the emotions in the world had nothing to do with him. However, tonight, when the war had come to an end, why had the incense and candles suddenly been lit? Who was he paying his respects to? Who could make this heartless man pay his respects in such a grand manner? Everyone was curious, but no one came over to check, because no one dared to ask. They were all working in the same realm, so they were well aware of Wu Ying's temper. He would not answer even if you asked, only staring at you with his dead eyes that flickered with will-o'-the-wisp. He would not speak a word from the beginning to the end. In the end, you would only run away from his stare. You might even have nightmares at night and not be able to sleep well for a long time. This was not a fantasy, it was a matter of experience. The sigh in the yard continued, but it was much softer. A person dressed in black was like a wandering ghost in the courtyard. His path was blocked by the candlelight in front of him. In his hand was a thin branch that was fiddling with the fire. Now, you've gone too. He sighed softly, talking to himself, but it seemed like he was talking to the person in front of him. In spite of this, there was only the light of the candles in front of him. Actually, I really didn't think that you would be abandoned as well. Perhaps you did, but you didn't tell me about it. The black shadow said softly, for so many years, we've been looking at each other from afar in this city. The times we could really sit together were few and far between. You seem to have forgotten that we were once life and death brothers. You seem to have forgotten that I was the one who killed your wife and brother. All these years, I've always wanted to explain it to you, but I don't think you need it. You've never given me a chance, and you've never said that you want to take revenge on me. So, I think you should know the truth. I just can't face it. That day, when you joined the Four Seasons Tower, I joined with you. It was to watch over you, to work together as brothers. Of course, be it good or bad, as long as I'm with you, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. You were sent to Tiantang City when the world changed a long time ago to deal with the possible changes. I told you then that the will of heaven cannot be defied, a gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. I thought you would understand and protect yourself. Some things that are born in response to the will of heaven are destined not to be destroyed. You stubbornly insist on going against the heavens, fighting against the heavens. I still followed you to Tiantang City. You chose to be a civil official, so of course, I had to be a military general for you, to avoid any loopholes. All these years, especially after the residents of 9 Supremes came into the world, I watched you go against the heavens, plotting against the 9 Supremes step by step, sending them into the abyss of certain death. I remember reminding you that the 9 Supremes would not perish. But you didn't believe it, you believed that man could conquer nature. But there's a limit to a man's strength. If the heavens insist on it, how can it be plotted by a man? He sighed softly. Now, we've finally come to this day, you've finally left. I wondered if you've understood anything before you left. You didn't contact me until the very end. You didn't want to implicate me, and you wanted to protect me? Hoping for a fluke? Wu Ying smiled faintly. I'm very happy, I'm very comforted because in your heart, I'm still your brother. It's a pity that it's useless. The other party will probably come for me tonight. The outcome now depends on whether I want to die or not. That's all there is to it. He spoke slowly in a low voice, fiddling with the thin wooden stick in his hand, fiddling with the fire and the ashes. Slowly, the flames grew smaller, turning into glowing ashes, and eventually, into ashes devoid of light and heat. He was still fiddling with the ashes. He checked carefully to see if there was any bit of the paper money he had given to his brother that had not been burned. He was afraid that he would miss a single bit and make this farewell incomplete. There was nothing left. Not a single drop was left out. There was nothing left. With a flip of his hand, a large pile of paper money appeared on the ground with a clatter. He lit the fire again and began fiddling with the ashes, repeating his previous actions. The only difference from before was that he no longer spoke, doing everything in silence. The flickering light from the fire illuminated his face. In this ghost-like courtyard, he was like a ghost that wandered the mortal world coldly. After a while, he looked up and tilted his head to listen carefully, then said faintly, Lord Supreme Cloud, since you're here, why don't you come down for a chat? His eyes quietly focused on the top of a large tree in front of him to his left. There was a faint cloud of smoke lingering there, drifting to and fro. As soon as he spoke, the faint cloud of smoke moved, drifting to the spot above him. With a spin, a masked man dressed in black appeared. The 9 Supreme Cloud had arrived at the right time. Wu Ying watched as the black silhouette beside him materialized from nothing and gradually coalesced into a human form. His eyes that were like will-o'-the-wisp were completely unruffled, much colder than the usual chilling gaze. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Wu Ying was still composed and said hoarsely, Lord Supreme Cloud comes and goes like a shadow indeed. If it weren't for my premonition, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to catch the minute oddities and notice your arrival. Yin Yang snorted and said faintly, Wu Ying, do you know that I've always admired you? No, it would be more appropriate to say that I respect you. If the truth wasn't right before my eyes, I wouldn't have thought that the other spy hiding in the deepest recesses of Yutong would be you. When I was certain, I even hoped that my judgment was wrong, that the so-called truth was a trap set up by the enemy to confuse me. However, the truth is the truth. No matter how reluctant I was to believe it, I couldn't not believe it. Wu Ying chuckled bitterly and said, Lord Supreme Cloud, what you've said has revealed half of what I wanted to say. Oh? Yin Yang asked. Wu Ying chuckled softly, his voice even more ethereal as he said, in the entire empire of Yutong, the people I respect, admire, and like the most are the 9 Supremes, the 9 of you. Furthermore, among the 9 of you, the one I value and respect the most is you, Lord Supreme Cloud. Chapter 671. Yin Yang chuckled mockingly. Sending us to hell because you like us? Are you going to say that because you like us too much but are destined to never have us, you might as well destroy us? Wu Ying replied seriously, not so. This lowly official's thoughts and actions are despicable, but there are still some things that I can distinguish. The 9 Supremes Lords have fought the world with all their might for the people of Yutong, bathed in blood on the battlefield. You are the best men in the world. I respect all of you from the bottom of my heart. This has long been decided, there is no doubt about it. In the battle of the east of the river back then, all of you came to our aid from thousands of miles away, fighting for 4 days and nights and finally repelling the enemy. Because of that, you saved 300,000 Yutong citizens, preventing them from being trampled by the enemy. My people were among them. Wu Ying said in a low voice, for this alone, Wu Ying, see the 9 Supremes Lords as my benefactors. Now that I've finally met my benefactor, please allow me to bow to you. Finishing his words, he lifted his robe and knelt on the ground, giving Yun Yang a few kowtows. Yun Yang was speechless. For a moment, he was a little dumbfounded, not knowing what to do or how to phrase his words. Yun Yang had thought of countless ways to start the conversation, but he had never thought of the situation before him. Everyone was hostile to each other, and it was hard to turn things around. It was reasonable for them to say a few words of flattery to each other, and it could even help to raise their statuses. But what was up with you kneeling down and kowtowing so openly? Isn't this too much? Yun Yang was not the only one who was dumbfounded, but Wu Ying was serious and solemn. After he had kowtowed 3 times, he stood up and said in a low voice, "My lord, you don't have to think that my actions are strange. I, Wu Ying, am from Yutong after all, a true Yutong citizen. When it comes to the rights and wrongs of the nation and its people, I'm still very clear." Yun Yang still did not know what to say. Clear? Are you really clear? If you are, why are you still the mastermind to frame the Empire's guardian? You almost caused the Empire to collapse and almost caused the extinction of the nation. Is this what you call being clear about the big picture? Wu Ying said calmly, "I can imagine what you're thinking right now, sir. There's no need to elaborate on the so-called great principles. Actually, everyone, be it good or bad, understands those great principles. However, when faced with certain things, there will always be people who make different choices. Different choices will, of course, result in different outcomes." He lifted his head, his eyes gleaming with will-o'-the-wisps as he looked at Yun Yang. Many people choose to be righteous for the sake of loyalty, choosing to serve the country with unwavering loyalty. Such people are, of course, worthy of respect. However, there are also those who choose to be self-reliant, choosing to achieve their personal goals, choosing to have a family, choosing friendships, brothers, and so on, or even choosing to live on. You can despise and even despise such people and their choices, but their choices have their standpoints as well. It's really just a difference of standpoints. What I have let down the 9 Supremes Lords is a momentary lapse in judgment. When faced with such a choice, although I knew which choice was the most benevolent one, I still chose the narrow-minded side, the selfish side. That's all. Yun Yang could not help smirking. It's rare for you to speak of the crime of treason in such a dignified manner. A momentary lapse in judgment? Because of your momentary lapse in judgment, millions of brothers have died in the battlefield because of your choices. Millions of elders and elders have been forced to wander from place to place, trapped between life and death because of your choices. Yet, you can still speak so confidently and with a clear conscience. Isn't it a wonder? Wu Ying said, confidently and with a clear conscience. Lord Supreme Cloud, you think too highly of me. Perhaps I can speak so confidently, but I dare not claim to have a clear conscience. However, ever since I've been appointed, I've done everything flawlessly, wholeheartedly for Yutong, for the Empire, for the world, for the people. I've exhausted myself and given my all, fearing that I might make the slightest mistake. I've done my duty as a citizen of Yutong. All these years, all the public affairs that have passed through my hands have always been perfect. Not a single one of them has ever been flawed. Does Lord Supreme Cloud really think that I'm only doing this to conceal my identity? I really want to do my duty as a citizen of Yutong, to do my part for the Empire of Yutong. This is what I should do, and it's also a little compensation from me. He said faintly, I think that my many years of planning and strategies, my many years of hard work, should be enough to save millions of people, or perhaps millions of comrades who should have died long ago. Of course, I know that murdering the 9 Supremes will result in unimaginable consequences, but I won't regret it once I've made my choice. I'll use my own way to make up for it. I dare even say that if I hadn't been coordinating and strategizing all these years, the Empire of Yutong might not have survived until the 9 Supremes' arrival. Do you believe it or not, Lord Supreme Cloud? Yun Yang laughed in spite of his anger. So what if I believe it? So what if it's the truth? In your own words, what you've done is your duty as a citizen to Yutong, and to the Imperial Court of Yutong, it's your duty. As a citizen of Yutong, since you've received your salary, you should work for the people and contribute to the nation, be it for public or private reasons. How can you offer it as compensation? Wu Ying said calmly, Lord Supreme Cloud's argument is suitable for most of Yutong's citizens. To them, it's indeed impossible. Once they've done something, it's an unpardonable crime. However, I shouldn't belong to this category. After all, there are too many people who receive the same salary and rations as I do. Looking at the entire Yutong military, who would dare say that they've done better than me? Even if old Marshal Chiu, old Grand Commandant Fang, and the others were here, I'd still dare to say this. Yin Yang chuckled and said, even if I want to deny Marshal Wu's words, I can't. After all, I can't erase my conscience and speak irresponsibly. Therefore, Marshal Wu is truly remarkable. However, according to your logic, I can't help but think that no one in this world can do better than me in certain aspects. Then, does that mean that I can do whatever I want and destroy the world? Wu Ying said quietly, it looks like Lord Supreme Cloud's perception of my argument is a little biased. I can only say that Lord Supreme Cloud can't agree with a lowly person like me. My reason is nothing but an excuse at the end of the day. I need to find a proper excuse to temporarily deceive myself. Otherwise, the torment in my heart alone is enough to make me unable to continue. With this excuse, at least I can feel that I still have a reason to continue despite what I've done. After all, I've done more good than harm to Yutong. It's better than nothing. This is my illusion, but it's Yutong's reality. Wu Ying said, don't you agree, Lord Supreme Cloud? Chapter 672. Yin Yang kept quiet for a bit and said, Marshal Wu, I don't really know how to comment on you anymore. What do you think you are? A true villain who deceives himself and others? Wu Ying said casually, I am indeed deceiving myself and others, and I am indeed a true villain, but at the same time, I am a powerful and capable true villain. My ability, at least for a long time, can't be replaced by anyone. Murderous intent flickered in Yin Yang's eyes. Do you know that no matter how irreplaceable a person is, once he dies, he's still a dead man? Even if his death will cause considerable turmoil, he won't exist in this world after all. This world, on the other hand, won't change at all. Wu Ying said, Lord Supreme Cloud is determined to kill me. I've guessed this a long time ago. From the beginning to the end, he had never addressed himself as this official, this general, this lowly official or this reputed one. He had only addressed himself as I. It was obvious that he no longer saw himself as a Yutong official or a military marshal. Yin Yang was well aware of this, but he had still addressed himself as Marshal Wu. After all, Wu Ying had indeed put in a lot of effort for Yutong all these years. The stability of Yutong's territory was largely due to this man. Even though their stances were clear now, this man's contributions could not be erased. Bai Zhongliu is already dead. Wu Ying said leisurely, back then, he had always said that his ability could bring peace to the nation and the world. Even when the nation was in danger and the country was on the verge of collapse, as long as he was given a chance, he could stabilize the nation. Therefore, he named himself Bai Zhongliu. Yin Yang said, oh? I wonder if he can still be called Bai Zhongliu when he goes to the netherworld? Yin Yang's tone was as calm as ever, but he was actually shocked. Bai Zhongliu, this name was very familiar. Many years ago, there had been a shocking case. The key person involved in it was a person called Bai Zhongliu. Yin Yang wondered if this Bai Zhongliu was this person. Wu Ying ignored the hidden mockery in his words and continued, Lord Supreme Cloud didn't attack right away. I guess you still have something you want to know? Why don't you explain it to Lord Supreme Cloud while I'm in the mood? He sighed faintly and said, Sir, do you know that all the words I've spoken in the past 20 years cannot be compared to what I've said today? Yin Yang's gaze was sharp as he said, I've long heard of Marshal Wu's reputation for being concise and direct. His words are the law when it comes to military affairs, his orders and prohibitions are executed without the slightest bias. However, he spoke so confidently and with assurance today, perhaps it's because after today, there won't be any more opportunities to speak. Wu Ying could not help but chuckle. Of course Lord Supreme Cloud is powerful, of course. He has the power to kill and rarely fails. However, he has underestimated me. I know that even if I can't kill Lord Supreme Cloud, much less be your opponent, I'm still quite confident that I can escape unscathed from Lord Supreme Cloud's clutches. It's just that Bai Zhongliu didn't get to see you before he died. To him, it was a great regret. I have to help him fulfill this wish. Yin Yang said, if that's the case, there's no need to waste words. I believe Marshal Wu knows what I want to know. Just tell me what you know. Why should I be the one asking? Wu Ying chuckled hoarsely and said, Sir, you're right, but I have to say the whole story first. It looks like this conversation will take a long time. Would Lord Supreme Cloud like to have a cup of tea with me? It was easy to deceive others, but difficult to deceive oneself. Wu Ying had long been stubborn about what he had done. Even now, he was saying that he had committed a grave mistake, but he did not take his sins too seriously. If it were not for Bai Zhongliu's matter and his desire to escape, his determination and stubbornness were actually the most unique among all the people from the Four Seasons Tower that Yun Yang had targeted. Before his words echoed in the air, without waiting for Yun Yang to speak, he shook his wrist and a table, chair, and tea set appeared on the ground. They were neatly arranged, and there was even a long-lit candle on the tea table. A formless mystical qi engulfed the space abruptly. The wind howled, but the flame of the candle did not waver. Lord Supreme Cloud, please take a seat. Wu Ying picked up the teapot and said with a smile, there's a saying that goes, 3 goblets of wine in the worldly affairs, a pot of tea for 1,000 years' cause. Everyone thinks that this saying is very imposing and there are countless interpretations, but I have a different understanding. Yin Yang sat down and said, Oh? May I ask what Marshal Wu thinks about this? Yin Yang asked. Wu Ying said, I think that this saying, 3 goblets of wine in the worldly affairs means that, anyone who has gone through this worldly affairs, 3 goblets of wine can be used as a tribute to him. As for, a pot of tea for 1,000 years' cause, it basically means that no matter how great a feat a person has done, no matter how meritorious he is, when the descendants talk about him after his death, they can talk about it clearly in the time of a pot of tea. Wu Ying shook his head and said faintly, just like how we're going to talk about Bai Zhongliu's life now. No matter how deep his thoughts are, how brilliant his schemes are, how meticulous his calculations are, how intelligent he is, how a 4th-grade civil minister, a martial world powerhouse, who can control the world, it's still a pot of tea. He lifted his head to look at Yun Yang. A pot of tea is enough for you to know everything about his life from my mouth. Wu Ying chuckled and spilled the tea on the ground, saying softly, So, brother, this is your 1,000-year cause. Yin Yang felt an indescribable sense of absurdity wash over him. It was the first time he had heard someone interpret these 2 lines in such a manner. In spite of this, he had to admit that it seemed to be a little, twisted. After all, twisted logic had to be justified before it could be used as an argument. Bai Zhongliu and I were childhood friends. Not only were we childhood sweethearts, we were also sworn brothers. We studied together when we were young, we studied under the same teacher in martial arts. He was older than me, so I called him elder brother. We've supported each other for so many years, but I've benefited more from him. That year, he was determined to serve the country and fulfill his ambition. With the title of Tiannan's top scholar, he entered the capital for the imperial examination. Before he left, I, who had failed, sent him off. He said, if he could gain the favor of a wise ruler, he would soar to the heavens and dance in the winds and clouds, he would command the 4 seas and 8 wastelands, he would rule the world without betrayal. He did it. With his well-known literary name, he was recognized by a high official the moment he entered the capital, who betrothed his beloved daughter to him. He even became the top scholar in the imperial examination, his limelight unparalleled. However, just as he was proud of his life and his career was about to take off, he was framed without warning and was involved in a case of rebellion. What surprised him even more was that the person who framed him was his new wife. His career was severed from then on. His wife was originally. Sigh, let's not talk about this anymore. After I found out that something had happened to him, I naturally couldn't just sit back and watch. I killed his father-in-law's family and another high official involved in the case, then I snuck into the prison and rescued him. At that time, he was devastated by what had happened. He only had love as his anchor, blinding his heart. His wife was the only one in his heart. Yet, when I killed him, his wife was already 7 months pregnant, Wu Ying said slowly as he brewed tea. We're brothers. No matter how sorrowful he was, he wouldn't have doubted my words. However, his own younger brother was beside him, accusing me of being the culprit who framed him, saying that I'd been dissatisfied with his wife for a long time. At that time, I was furious, really furious, so I stormed out. After that, I accidentally found out that his younger brother was one of the people who framed him. I was so furious that I killed him in the middle of the night. However, just as I was about to cut off his head, Bai Zhongliu appeared at the door. I don't know if it was a coincidence or not. Wu Ying sighed softly. No matter how hard I tried to explain, it didn't help. From then on, we didn't see each other again. Yun Yang sighed as he listened. He had killed someone else's pregnant wife and his own younger brother right in front of him. They still didn't see each other again, but they didn't turn into enemies. The grudge and the relationship between them were truly indescribable. Wu Ying narrated the past grudges and feelings in a very simple manner, recounting everything in one breath. In spite of this, Yun Yang could imagine the process in his mind, how terrifying it must have been. With Sir Bai's intelligence and resourcefulness, what level of scheme must it have been to have been set up to this point? Thinking back to Wu Ying's seamless and flawless way of handling things, Sir Bai, the only person who should not have met him, had actually seen through his murder. What kind of scheme was hidden within? Everything was illogical, or it could be said that the more one thought about it, the more terrifying it would be. However, Yin Yang had heard of the case back then and had even read through the case files. However, it had been a long time and many of the files were missing. They had long become unsolvable mysteries that could no longer be cleared up. Wu Ying, who was standing before him, was obviously an insider of the old case back then. He might even be a person involved in it, but he had only spoken about it briefly now. It was difficult for him to explain more. Yin Yang could also tell that he did not want to talk about the case back then at all. He only wanted to talk about Bai Zhongliu's life, so he could not skip this part. Actually, I know that Bai Zhongliu knows everything. He just doesn't want to face the truth, especially after I killed these people. That's all. Perhaps, to him, not facing it is also a way to face it. The two of us, he didn't really want to cut ties with me. Not interacting with me doesn't mean that we're strangers. He's been watching me all these years and I've been watching him too. If he really wanted to cut ties with me, why would he still be watching me? Chapter 673. We're a pair of brothers who have gone through life and death together. I believe Lord Supreme Cloud can still understand this, said Wu Ying. Yes, I understand. Yin Yang sighed. It was no wonder that everyone knew Sir Bai, but no one knew what his real name was. This was because the name Bai Zhongliu was a taboo name that could never appear. Therefore, Sir Bai was only the Crown Prince's aide. The chief aide was still just an aide, he had never actually entered the officialdom. Later on, Bai Zhongliu joined the Four Seasons Tower for some unknown reason. Wu Ying said faintly, I was cultivating the deadly Yin poison physique then and had some success, but I've always felt guilty towards him, so I followed him and joined the Four Seasons Tower. A few years later, he was sent to Tiantang City first. Not long after that, I arrived in Tiantang City as well. Then, we looked at each other from afar for a very, very long time. He chose to work as an aide for Yutong's royalty while I became a member of the military. We never met again, but since then, the Four Seasons Tower had a legend of a civil and military leader. Wu Ying poured another cup of tea onto the ground lightly. He sighed softly. Based on the way he did things, Bai Zhongliu's temperament had changed after the incident back then. However, I don't care about this change. No matter how much he has changed, he's still him. He's still my brother, Bai Zhongliu. Even if he chose to go against the 9 Supremes, I'll still stand by his side and assist him as best I can. So what if my conscience is uneasy? We're brothers in this lifetime. If he wants to go to hell, of course, I'll go with him. Wu Ying said faintly, his tone carefree and joyful. I knew it was wrong, I knew it was a grave sin, I felt guilty. However, I did it and I followed him. I have no regrets. Yin Yang sighed again. Faced with such a person, he once again felt that he had nothing to say and nothing to refute him. He could distinguish right from wrong, good from evil, but he persisted in doing bad things. Actually, I did remind him that day. I told him that since the 9 heavens domain had descended upon Yutong, it was heaven's will that was protecting them. Then, it was destined that it would be impossible to eradicate the 9 Supremes. Heaven's will wouldn't allow it. But he didn't reply. He was determined to go against the heavens. Then I will follow him and defy the heavens. Therefore, I began to obliterate all the relevant evidence behind him. Every trace, every drop. Everything was obliterated. I believe you have a rough idea of the details regarding the ambush of the 9 Supremes. The last thing I can add to this matter is that the entire setup originated from the information I provided and the opportunity one created. Then, it was Bai Zhongliu who laid out the plan and meticulously laid out the ambush. Then, he used some people to slowly spread the news to Spring Frost. These are the minor details. Our cooperation has already completed half of the entire setup. Reality has proven that man can triumph over nature. Wu Ying went on and on, describing the entire setup in detail with an almost boastful tone. Yin Yang was comparing them one by one. After all, the amount of information he had received regarding the 4 Seasons Tower during this period of time was too much. He had to sort them out one by one. From the Crown Prince, Sir Bai, to Venerable Lord Ice, Yang Butao, Supreme Lord Springfrost, and so on, Yun Yang heaved a long sigh in his heart. How was this a plan? It was countless threads that were all mixed together to form an inescapable net against the 9 Supremes. The goal was to force the 9 Supremes to Tianxian Cliff. Each link was closely linked to the next, one step closer to the next. Everything was linked and seamless. Yin Yang's back was drenched in cold sweat as he listened. The 9 Supremes think tank felt that his brain was inadequate for the first time after listening to such a plan. Even if he were to start all over again, he and his brothers might not be able to escape. The people they had used in the entire setup were mostly clueless. There were many of them who did not know anything at all, some of them were loyal to Yutong and the 9 Supremes. They had only become a small part of the entire scheme because they had passed on some information. Usually, it would take 3 or 4 pieces of information to piece together to form a relatively complete piece of information. Who would have thought that there would be ulterior motives and ulterior motives in this? What did it mean to send a military warfare officer to do? What did it mean to have someone on the other side do? What did it mean to have someone on the other side? What did it mean to have done? Then, the other side would gather and form a chain of information. It was so complicated and noisy that it was simply unimaginable. It was no wonder that he had only managed to find out that Supreme Lord Springfrost was the mastermind behind Tiantang City. None of these pieces of information could be traced back to Sir Bai and Wu Ying. Even when Yun Yang knew everything now, knowing that all of this was done to go against him and the 9 Supremes, he still felt that such a plan was a masterpiece that could not be replicated. It was a heaven-defying plan indeed, capable of doing what others could not. What an unparalleled talent. Yin Yang sighed softly and said, "You are a beauty, but why did you become a thief?" Wu Ying replied faintly, "How can one become a thief if one is not capable? How can those mediocre people be qualified to be thieves?" Yin Yang said, "Bai Zhongliu's bizarre death a few days ago, was it due to some mysterious seal? Like Supreme Lord Springfrost's seal back then?" Wu Ying said, Who in the Four Seasons Tower doesn't have a seal on them? Including Mr. Nian, whom you all know. Does he not have a seal on him? Heh. Yin Yang felt a jolt in his heart when he heard the question. Isn't Mr. Nian the Four Seasons Tower's supreme leader? Why would he have a seal on him as well? Wu Ying said, Mr. Nian is indeed the Four Seasons Tower's supreme leader, but there's only one Mr. Nian without a seal on him. As for the other Mr. Nians, I don't know how many there are. Yin Yang mused, I see. So this is the truth about Mr. Nian. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that you have a seal on you as well? Wu Ying sneered, I did have a seal on me too. The Four Seasons Tower's seal on the higher-ups is unique, it's rooted in one's cultivation method. Once the seal is triggered, 80% of the cultivation method that one has cultivated for their entire life will be lost. Which cultivator would be willing to give up the cultivation method that they have cultivated diligently for their entire life? However, I already had a plan when I first joined the Four Seasons Tower. When I arrived at Enchanting City, I immediately abolished the Yin poison physique that I cultivated and switched to Bright Saint Sutra. The so-called cultivation method seal has long since ceased to exist for me. This is also the main reason why I haven't stepped out of this yard for decades. Wu Ying looked around the yard in a daze and said sadly, I've racked my brains and plotted for such a long time, but it's all in vain. Bai Zhongliu is still dead. Speaking of this, Wu Ying heaved a long sigh and stood in a daze. After a long time, 2 drops of tears fell from his eyes as he said sadly, he's still dead after all, I07. The king of web literature had a meeting until past 10:00 today. I didn't expect to write until now. I'm extremely tired. I still have a meeting on the 20th, as well as activities. I might as well take a day off. I09. Chapter 674. Yin Yang was deep in thought, obviously digesting everything Wu Ying had said. The inside story was not small indeed. The Four Seasons Tower's foundation was still strong, but what was revealed was only the tip of the iceberg. Yin Yang had thought of similar things and had experienced it more than once or twice. Although he was still not used to it and did not like it, it was the truth after all. He had no choice but to face it positively. However, the outcome was still acceptable for the time being. It could be said that it was rather gratifying, because it could be confirmed that other than Wu Ying, who stood before him, and the traitorous Venerable Sword, Snow, and Frost, there were no more spies from the Four Seasons Tower in Enchanting City or even the entire empire of Yutong. In other words, the internal threat that the Four Seasons Tower had created in Yutong had been completely quelled. Of course, this did not apply to His Highness the Crown Prince and the unfortunate third and fourth princes. That was because these 3 fellows were actually all involved in this huge conspiracy. At that moment, Yin Yang suddenly did not want to keep a whetstone for Bauer anymore. His mind was filled with the thought of killing these 3 bastards one by one to vent the hatred in his heart. Although Wu Ying was the biggest culprit behind the ambush of the 9 Supremes in Tianxian Mountain, Yin Yang's vengeance would not cause much of a ripple with the man's temperament. He would not even feel the thrill of revenge. A man like him, who was like a walking corpse, was already indifferent to life and death and had no desires. Even if he were to be tortured to death and tortured to death, what could he do? Thinking of this, Yin Yang could not help feeling dejected and uncomfortable. Forget it, there were still the 3 princes he could target and Mr. Nian from the Four Seasons Tower. They would not have such a state of mind, would they? There was still a way to settle this score. No matter how many schemes you have devised, even if you have made a wrong move, Bai Zhongliu is still dead. Yin Yang said faintly, actually, from what I can see, it's impossible for him not to die. Since he has done such a thing, this outcome is only a matter of time. Even if the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups didn't decide to take his life and take away his vitality, or if he was unwilling to die, would I have let him go? That day, I had already decided to kill him. If he hadn't died, would have killed him. Therefore, he had to die no matter what. There can only be one result. A ghostly fire flashed in Wu Ying's eyes as he said eerily, Looks like the heavens have indeed blessed Lord Supreme Cloud. He didn't die in your hands after all. It's a blessing for both you and him. Yin Yang smiled, a sharp glint flashing across his eyes as he said faintly, that's right. He should feel fortunate that he didn't die in my hands. If he had died in my hands, he wouldn't have died so easily. Wu Ying's words carried a hidden meaning, but he did not understand it. However, Yin Yang did not conceal his words at all. It was a direct confrontation between the two armies, with swords drawn. Wu Ying turned his head abruptly. His will-o'-the-wisp eyes suddenly turned as sharp as the edge of a blade as they focused on Yin Yang's face. He uttered word by word, Lord Supreme Cloud, do you mean to torture and seek revenge? Or perhaps, Lord Supreme Cloud is actually very disappointed that he didn't torture Bai Zhongliu? Yin Yang replied calmly, with the intelligence system that you possess, you should know that torturing people like you who commit treason, murder the loyal, and ruin the empire is the most enjoyable thing in my life. Ha ha ha. What a delightful thing. Wu Ying guffawed, but his voice and expression were as cold as a snowy mountain. Yin Yang's gaze slowly turned cold and sharp as he said faintly, Marshal Wu, you've said so much. Do you have anything else to add? Wu Ying sucked in a deep breath as if he was about to explode, but he swallowed it abruptly and said, yes. Yin Yang said faintly, then, please continue, Marshal Wu. Wu Ying said slowly, I'm not your prisoner. You don't have to use an interrogating tone to talk to me. Yin Yang replied coldly, I thought that my words were polite enough. Marshal Wu, do you still find it displeasing to your ears? In spite of this, some words that were left unsaid would only become Marshal Wu's lifelong regret. Otherwise, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to see Marshal Wu here. Isn't that so? Wu Ying snorted and said, but is this how Lord Supreme Cloud treats those who sincerely provide you with intelligence? Yin Yang replied faintly, Marshal Wu's words are rather uncouth. Now that we know each other, whether I ask or not, Marshal Wu will still speak. Do you think that Marshal Wu won't speak if I humiliate Marshal Wu? Wu Ying suddenly guffawed, almost tearing up from his laughter. Lord Supreme Cloud is indeed Lord Supreme Cloud. I'm impressed. Forget it. Since you've said that we know each other, there's no need to say more. I've waited for Lord Supreme Cloud to come tonight mainly to ask for a favor from you, said Wu Ying. Marshal Wu wants to live a little longer, right? Yin Yang said, Marshal Wu was indignant that he couldn't save Bai Zhongliu from death in time, so he wanted to live to witness the Four Seasons Tower's downfall on his behalf. With your eyes, you completed Bai Zhongliu's lifelong regret, am I right? Yes, answered Wu Ying. Yin Yang was silent for a moment, feeling his emotions rising and falling. His eyes unconsciously turned towards the dark sky that was already covered by the thick shade of the tree leaves. He did not speak for a long time. After a while, he said softly, the Four Seasons Tower was originally united, no one has ever been able to divide and incite rebellion. What I want to know the most now is why were you all so loyal to the Four Seasons Tower? Other than that, what is the reason for your rebellious thoughts now? He avoided the topic and went straight to the next topic. Wu Ying was not the least bit surprised. Hearing Yin Yang's question, Wu Ying said, there's a saying among the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups, come to the tower if you wish for immortality. If it's just the word immortality, I'm afraid it's not enough, said Yin Yang indifferently. Death is inevitable, the Four Seasons Tower has a soul. Wu Ying said, even if a person is already dead, the Four Seasons Tower can still give him another chance at life. Yin Yang was quiet. He thought about it and said, if this is all, it's still not enough. At least, it's hard for the pinnacle of this world to be moved. After the 9th transformation, one can live a carefree life, said Wu Ying. Yin Yang was taken aback and asked in surprise, what do you mean? The Four Seasons Towers and 9 revolutions truly means that as long as one has enough merit points, one can go to the pavilion of 9 revolutions to choose a godly art, an immortal golden pill, and a pill of heaven's path. Wu Ying said, as long as you consume the divine pill of heavenly way, you will be able to elevate your divine skill to the realm of initial mastery. The effect is unimaginably great. Once you've stabilized your current realm, or even taken a step further, you can consume the immortal golden pill. With the help of the pill, you will be able to cultivate this cultivation method to the realm of mastery. Once you've completed the cultivation of this cultivation method, even if you can't transcend mortality and enter sainthood, and become a deity, you will still be able to live freely for tens of thousands of years in this world. Your cultivation base will also be invincible except for a select few. What's more, when the time comes, those whose cultivation base is accomplished can even remove all the seals on them. By then, if you wish to live a carefree life, the Four Seasons Tower will provide you with the title of a foreign elder. You can do as you please. Compared to the removal of the restriction, the benefits won't be reduced. If you haven't used the fatal disaster that belongs to you by then, you can still enjoy the authority of the fatal disaster and the soul of the Four Seasons. It's fine even if it's passed on to a third party. All of this is witnessed by Heaven's oath. Even the master of the Four Seasons Tower can't go against it. Yin Yang was hit with a sudden realization. I see. Joining the Four Seasons Tower, not only will one have the support of an invincible force, they'll also have the hope of immortality in front of them, not to mention the guarantee of immortality and the chance to finally leave the Four Seasons Tower and become truly free. Faced with such benefits, even the pinnacle of this world will find it hard to resist. No wonder, no wonder. Yin Yang was deep in thought. He had to admit that the Four Seasons Tower's offer was unparalleled in the entire world. In this world, anyone who had money, power, and ambition would all want to live a long life. They would all want to die but not die. They would all want to be the pinnacle of this world. They would all want to live a carefree life for 10,000 years. These were the four major weaknesses of human nature. Moreover, such generous terms were guaranteed. Under Heaven's oath, no one dared to go against it, no one could. The Four Seasons Tower is impressive indeed. What a generous offer. Yin Yang sighed and said, but like Marshal Wu said, such benefits can only be enjoyed by those who have reached the highest realm. How could there be such a loophole in the Four Seasons Tower's arrangement? Don't you know, Lord Supreme Cloud, that not only will no one who is qualified to join the Four Seasons Tower be inferior, no one will even think that they are inferior to others. What others can do, they will never think that they can't do it, but that they can do it better. Wu Ying sneered. Until now, there are still so many people who are willing to go through fire and water in the Four Seasons Tower without any second thoughts. Since there are so many benefits, I really can't think of why all of you would have second thoughts. You are like that, and so is the deceased Bai Zhongliu. Could there be some unforeseen event that has caused you to have other thoughts? Yin Yang acutely noticed a key point. Initially, with the heavenly oath as a guarantee, everyone would be at ease. However, after the battle at Tianxian Cliff that day. To be more precise, after Lord Supreme Cloud launched his revenge, we gradually realized that something was amiss. Wu Ying said in a low voice. Oh. Yin Yang seemed to have grasped the crux of the matter, but he needed Wu Ying's confirmation. For so many years, it has been too long since anyone dared to set their sights on the Four Seasons path. The last time someone threatened the Four Seasons Tower was Ling Xiaozui. Until now, there is really nothing in this world that can pose a threat to the Four Seasons Tower. However, since Lord Supreme Cloud launched his revenge, many of the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups, including Supreme Lord Springfrost and the two Venerable Lords, didn't come back to life. It was still fine at the beginning. If it was only 1, 2, or 3 of them, perhaps their chances of survival had long been used up. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to survive. However, as long as one is suspicious, no matter how perfect the disguise is, as long as one is patient, one can eventually find something suspicious. For example, the seal on us. As a result, Lord Supreme Cloud's step-by-step revenge has been flawless and meticulous, but until now, no one has been able to find out where Lord Supreme Cloud really is or who his real identity is. However, has Lord Supreme Cloud noticed, or rather, suspected, that the exposure of many of the Four Seasons Tower's people is akin to sending themselves to your doorstep to be killed by you? The process of your revenge can be said to be fraught with difficulties, but if one were to look into it, it can hardly be smooth. I don't believe that Lord Supreme Cloud didn't feel this at all. If you really didn't, then the name of the Nine Supremes think tank is undeserving. The will-o'-the-wisp in Wu Ying's eyes flickered. Yin Yang was struck by a thought and said, I do have this feeling too, but why? Wu Ying said, sigh, this is what I don't understand as well. So many people have died for no reason. The higher-ups have been clamoring to track down Supreme Cloud every day, to get to the bottom of it, but there hasn't been any major action. Why is this so? Is it just to let so many people die in vain after alerting the enemy? Wu Ying said, that's why I can't die. I have to know what all of this is for. I want to see the Four Seasons Tower fall. I want to live a little longer. However, Lord Supreme Cloud has found me. He can't let me go just like that, no matter what. If I want to stay here, I have to get Lord Supreme Cloud's approval, Wu Ying said honestly, his tone unperturbed. Yin Yang said quietly, before I came here, the world is vast. You can roam freely, you can go wherever you want and live. Wu Ying said faintly, but I still want to stay in Yutong's board of military and continue doing my own thing. Only by staying here can my heart be at peace. Yin Yang lifted his head to look at him. Wu Ying said faintly, I've completed the Four Seasons Tower's mission. The only brother who could touch my heart has died as well. Before I die, during these days where I'm waiting for the results, I only want to live as a citizen of Yutong or an official of Yutong. Therefore, I wish to continue doing things for my country. That's all. If Lord Supreme Cloud doesn't agree, then I can try my best to escape and hide far away in the martial world. I believe that I can escape. He looked at Yun Yang calmly and said, now, I only owe Lord Supreme Cloud a word. May I ask what you think of it? Yin Yang squinted, looking at the culprit who was speaking confidently in front of him. His state of mind was unprecedentedly conflicted. He could feel the sincerity in every word that Wu Ying was saying. There was not a single lie in his words. Wu Ying was indeed a capable person. It could even be said that no one in the entire Yutong military could match his ability, let alone replace it. What he said about wanting to do things for the country was sincere as well. However, can I not avenge so many of my brothers? In addition, what Wu Ying had said was also what Yun Yang had been thinking about for a long time. The Four Seasons Tower's influence in the secular world had been destroyed by him one after another. It seemed difficult, but everything had been strangely smooth. What was all this for? Yin Yang thought that there must be a reason behind it, but now that he thought about it, there was no reason at all. 4,000 words today, 2 in 1. He could not continue writing until this point. Should he kill Wu Ying? Should he die? Let's discuss this. Today is the birthday of our chief ronger of the Feng family. Let us wish her a happy birthday, forever young and beautiful. Chief Ronger has been following Supreme Lord ever since he opened his books. She has never left through the ups and downs. She has stayed up all night reviewing books, paying attention to analysis, uniting readers. She has done so much for the Feng family. Chapter 675. So, Lord Supreme Cloud, tell me, should I keep this lowly life of mine, or should I simply die? Until now, Wu Ying's voice was still calm, his gaze cold and indifferent. Seeing that Yun Yang did not answer, he pressed for another question and mumbled to himself, honestly speaking, if I were you, I wouldn't let my enemy live. The future is limitless, so are the variables. A momentary indulgence may be a regret in the future. Only by eliminating the threat now is the best solution. Yin Yang smirked and said, you still want to live deep down. No matter what your purpose is, you still want to live. That's why you're provoking me with words. Wu Ying said indifferently, in this world, who wouldn't want to live when they're faced with certain death? That's right. Yin Yang felt his blood boil as he said sternly, you're right. In this world, Who wouldn't want to live when they're faced with certain death? He lowered his voice and growled, "My brothers, even when they're faced with the final moments of the battle at Tianshan Cliff, would they not want to live?" His words were like a bolt from the blue. Wu Ying stood rooted to the spot like a statue. For the past 7 years, the tens of millions of brave souls who have sacrificed themselves in defending the nation's battlefield. Even if they had no regrets when their blood was shed on the battlefield, would they not want to live? Yin Yang took a step forward and glared fiercely at Wu Ying. Wu Ying stood rooted to the spot. Which one of them isn't loyal to the nation? Which one of them isn't a pillar of the nation? Which one of them isn't a loyal minister and a good general? Which one of them isn't a man with lofty ideals? Which one of them isn't a citizen of Yutong? Which one of them isn't a man who has shed his blood? Are you the only one who has the ability? Which one of these brothers doesn't have the ability? Yin Yang's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he approached step by step, panting heavily. Wu Ying still stood rooted to the spot, allowing Yin Yang's saliva to splatter all over his face as he came closer. If you say to be fair, then be fair. Everybody wants to live. Who doesn't have brothers, comrades, wives, and children? Who doesn't have parents? Who doesn't have a family? Who doesn't have brothers? Yin Yang's words were like knives, but they chose to die in the end, leaving without hesitation. His gaze was like a blood-soaked steel knife that was nailed to Wu Ying's face. You're a man who brings disaster to the country and its people, a traitor who conspires against the country. What right do you have to say that you want to live? Wu Ying's gaze was a little dazed as he murmured, I don't want to live for a long time. I only want to live for a few more years. As long as I can see the Four Seasons Tower fall, that would be enough. Is this an extravagant wish? He seemed to be defending himself, as if he was talking to himself. However, his voice grew fainter and fainter. Finally, he closed his eyes and said, "When that day comes, I'll naturally confess all my crimes and die as an apology to the world. When the time comes, Supreme Cloud won't even have to do anything. Wu Ying's head will naturally be placed on a plate and presented to Supreme Cloud." As he spoke, he opened his eyes and looked at Yin Yang. The latter's gaze was as cold as a blade. For some reason, Wu Ying dared not face such a gaze. He averted his gaze in disappointment and closed his eyes, remaining motionless for a long time. After some time, he said bitterly, "If Lord Supreme Cloud can't be appeased, it's only human nature. You can do it now. It's only a life of certain death. It doesn't matter if it's 3 years earlier or 3 years later. This old man has few attachments in this world. It's too pretentious of me to plead for mercy now." His face suddenly contorted as he murmured, "What man does, the heavens watch. Even if I can make amends after my sins are done, it'll never be enough. In the end, I want to make amends in these few years. Make amends to my country, my people. Deep down, it's still for my own selfish desire, the desire to make amends. Lord Supreme Cloud is right. I really have no reason to live. Throughout our journey, no matter what our intentions were, no matter what our original intentions were, there were too many good men who died because of us. Bai Zhongliu is already dead, why should I struggle to survive and linger on with my last breath? Even if I have 1,000 reasons and 10,000 reasons, so what? They're just lies to deceive myself. After so many years, I've actually gotten used to lying to myself, thinking that I can really make up for the sins I've committed. I've said all that needs to be said. Please do it." His eyes were still closed as he continued to murmur. His voice grew increasingly bleak as his condition worsened. It was as if he had aged dozens of years in this short span of time. White spots could be seen by the naked eye on the sides of his temples. He stood with his neck straight, unmoving. His eyes were still shut, waiting for the fatal blow to arrive. The journey to the underworld was a righteous one. However, after a long, long time, there was still no lethal saber wind. Why isn't Lord Supreme Cloud making a move? Wu Ying sighed in melancholy. What are you waiting for? There was no answer. After a while, Wu Ying opened his eyes abruptly and focused his gaze in front of him. Only then did he realize that the space before him was empty. There was no trace of anyone. Lord Supreme Cloud, who was shrouded in a cloud of smoke, had long disappeared. Wu Ying lifted his head hastily, only to see a faint cloud of smoke rising into the sky. It had already gone to where the thick shade of the tree leaves had been. Without the slightest hesitation or pause, it had left leisurely. In the next moment, a gust of wind blew in the sky. Silence returned to the heaven and earth. Wu Ying stood rooted to the spot, stunned. He did not make a sound for a long time. Supreme Cloud had left just like that without saying a word or giving any instructions. He had reprimanded Wu Ying harshly, his murderous intent soaring into the sky. However, he had still chosen to spare Wu Ying's life in the end. It looks like he doesn't want to kill me. Or perhaps, he's agreed to my request. Wu Ying squatted down and fiddled with the ashes on the ground, murmuring, "So, we were wrong. It's impossible that he doesn't want to kill me. It's because my talent is still useful to the Empire of Yutong. Now that Yutong is plagued by internal and external threats, he wants me to contribute more. Although he really wants to kill me for revenge, for the country he's guarding, he's willing to put aside his personal grudges for the time being, to face the external forces with sincerity. Lord Supreme Cloud is indeed the best man I've ever seen in my life. Don't worry. When I see the Four Seasons Tower's destruction, I'll go down and reunite with you. In this remaining time, I'll do my best to assist the Empire of Yutong and help you realize your original intention, to settle the Emperor's affairs. If I still can't do it by then, I'll go down to look for you. I believe that a few more years should be enough. What do you think?" Wu Ying murmured. "If I ask for too much, I'll be asking for too much." He took out incense, candles, and paper money from his spatial ring and continued burning them. "I'll burn more now. You can keep them and use them slowly. Don't be thrifty. In the future, as long as I'm free, I'll burn more of them. Burn more while I'm still alive. Don't be too thrifty. Don't spend them all either. Remember to leave some for me. When I go down, I'm afraid there won't be any left. I guess it'll be rare for people like us to have people burning paper money for us," he murmured to himself, as if there was someone sitting quietly in front of him, quietly watching him, quietly listening to him. "This shall be how I am from now on. This debt of blood must be repaid eventually. This blood debt shall be repaid as much as I can." Yin Yang turned into a floating cloud and left the board of military. Although the matter had been resolved, he still felt indescribably frustrated and could hardly calm down. Chapter 676. Yin Yang walked against the wind. The north wind was strong, but it could not blow away the depression in his heart. Whether my choice today was right or wrong, how can I say it now? Perhaps it is wrong to not be able to settle the debt of gratitude and vengeance, but I hope that my choice will be useful in the grand scheme of things. I am still a citizen of Yutong after all. Personal grudges should be put aside for the time being when the country is in a precarious situation. Brothers, will you blame me? Sigh, how can I not know what kind of people you are? It is destined that you will not blame me. But I will blame myself. The right and wrong in this world, the choice of right and wrong, is so difficult. It is not simply a matter of standpoint, nor is it purely a matter of wisdom. It is so helpless, so helpless. Yin Yang heaved a long sigh. He had made his choice and knew that it was the best choice for the current situation. However, the gloom in his heart only grew, unable to be soothed. He had given up on the first goal. Then, he might as well finish all the things that had been piling up. The wind howled. Yin Yang quietly came to old Marshal Qiu Jinhan's residence. Old Marshal Qiu Jinhan's residence had been gloomy for a long time. Qiu Jinhan had yet to wake up. Old Mistress Qiu had invited countless famous physicians, and almost all of the palace's royal physicians had moved into the Qiu residence. The palace's countless rare medicinal herbs were almost emptied. His Majesty the Emperor had ordered them to move over first, whether they were needed or not. What if they were not available at the last minute when they were needed, delaying the task? Save old Marshal Chiu at all costs. Even if the Emperor's blood was needed as a medicinal catalyst, come and get it. Whoever could save this old bastard would be promoted 3 ranks and granted the title of Duke, a hereditary title. Even if they were to rebel, they would be granted a death exemption medallion. The Emperor's promise could not be said to be light. The royal physicians were trembling in fear, as if they were treading on thin ice. Each of them had unleashed their trump cards, fighting with all their might. Even so, the royal physicians were still reprimanded by His Majesty the Emperor every single day. No matter what you do, the old marshal won't wake up. What can you do? His Majesty would come for a checkup every 3 days. Every time he came, he would sigh for a long time, cry for a long time, be silent for a long time, and then scold the royal doctors furiously for a long time. He did not want to be angry. He knew that the royal doctors had tried their best, but there was nothing they could do. However, each time he saw Chiu Jianhan looking like a living dead, he felt like killing someone. It was late at night. Old Mistress Chiu was beside old Marshal Chiu's bed, taking good care of him. Looking at Chiu Jianhan, who looked like he was in a deep sleep, the old mistress sighed in melancholy. Old man Chiu, this old woman has been married to you for a lifetime. Why didn't I realize that you were actually so important? My heart was always on edge when you were away on the battlefield, afraid that you wouldn't be able to come back. Now that you're back and I can see you every day, my heart is still on edge. As she spoke, the old lady suddenly laughed. What am I saying? Compared to those soldiers who died on the battlefield, you're much luckier. Even if you really can't wake up, I'll still be content. You're in front of me now. Just as she was mumbling, the soft sound of the wind could be heard. In front of the bed, a black shadow appeared out of thin air. Who are you? What are you here for? The old mistress was someone who had been through a lot. Despite the sudden appearance of the situation, she was not flustered at all, answering with composure. I am Supreme Cloud. The black shadow said, I'm here to save old Marshal from waking up. The old mistress was stunned when she heard the words. Suddenly, she felt the world spinning around her, tears flowing uncontrollably from her eyes. The latter half of the night. Chiu Jianhan, who had been in a deep sleep for a long time, slowly woke up. Now that Emmy had returned, Yun Yang would no longer treat most of the incurable illnesses in this world seriously. At the very least, he would not be as helpless as he was in the past. In fact, the old marshal had probably exhausted too much of his life force and could not replenish it in time. Yun Yang had used his own blood essence to help him, which was equivalent to using the world's top heaven and earth resources to prolong his life. It could already ensure his survival, but the burden on the old marshal's physical body was also too great. It was difficult for him to fully unleash the effects of his precious blood. However, these conditions were insignificant to Emmy. It could be easily solved. Unexpectedly to Yun Yang, the old marshal who had regained consciousness was almost devoid of negative emotions. It was as if this deep sleep was nothing but a long, long dream to him. To be more precise, it was a sweet dream that he did not want to wake up from. In the dream, so many old brothers, so many comrades in arms, who drank and ate with him, who crossed the mountains with him, who advanced with him. Many of them were his old brothers who had sacrificed themselves many years ago. Now, they were all gathered together again. It was a rare joy. He still remembered that many of his old brothers would ask the same question, what will happen to my family after I die? This was Chiu Jianhan's proudest moment. He patted his chest and said proudly, with your father here, what can happen to your family? Are you looking down on your father? Don't believe in your father? Do you think that your father didn't take good care of them? Some of his old brothers asked, how is our country? Chiu Jianhan was worried. Still fighting. We can definitely win. We've won so many times, this time won't be an exception. Thus, everyone sighed and cheered together. Some of his old brothers asked, who are the 9 supremes? Qiu Jianhan was proud again. Your father knows. Your father is one of the few who knows. Even old head Lang and old head Fong don't know this secret, but your father does. But how can your father tell you? Humph. Many of them curled their lips and jeered, this old man is already dead and he's still keeping it a secret. Who is he keeping it a secret to? Qiu Jianhan only laughed without saying a word. What he had promised, he had to keep it a secret even in death. Death, could that be the reason? However, it had to be said that the old marshal had been too relaxed, too happy, and too carefree during this period of time. Every day, he had nothing to do but drink, chat, and bicker. Today, he would play with this, tomorrow, he would play with that. There were hundreds of thousands of brothers here. He would never be lonely at any time. Now, however, when he suddenly woke up and opened his eyes to see that he was actually still alive on his own bed, a surge of reluctance welled up in his heart. F***ck, who was it that was so blind as to pull me back? Your father hasn't had enough fun yet. Then, he saw Yun Yang. Yun Yang, dressed in black, looked like he was shrouded in smoke. He recognized Yun Yang as well. There was only one person in this world who could be in such a state. He understood the current situation immediately and his expression darkened as he grumbled unhappily, why can't you wait a little longer? Tell the prophet, I haven't had the time to bid farewell to them. Yin Yang was taken aback. He could not wrap his head around it. Farewell? What do you mean? I really don't understand. Chapter 677. Yin Yang was dumbfounded. Qiu Jianhan said angrily, what are you looking at? Don't you know that this old man is dreaming of meeting so many old brothers? Do you understand the joy we have together? Now that you've pulled me away with the bayou, this old man hasn't even realized what was going on. Of course, I didn't have the time to say goodbye. Wouldn't I be offended by my old brothers? Yin Yang was exasperated. This old man was still as shameless as ever. He was indeed the leader of the capital's top 3 rogues, a true rogue. You've been in a coma for a few months, all right? It's only because I have Emmy's support that I managed to save you. Now that you're awake and alive, not only are you full of gratitude, you're actually blaming me for not telling you in advance. Lin Huang thought to himself. Is this something that can be told in advance? Besides, how do you expect me to tell you in advance? This is the first time I've seen someone behaving like a rogue right after waking up from a coma for a few months. Just as a certain someone was about to reply with a dark expression, the old mistress behind him interjected, why? Did I make a mistake in saving you? You actually want to bid farewell? You're actually still having fun with so many old brothers? Even if you break the heavens, there's no such fallacious logic. Could it be that you're saying that you won't be happy when you're with me? Then go back to your old brothers. Why did you wake up? The old mistress was filled with resentment. Old Marshal Qiu shuddered upon hearing her words. Suddenly, he grabbed Yun Yang's hand and shook it, his eyes brimming with tears as he said, I still have to thank you. Although I have many old brothers over there, what I miss the most is still my home, especially her at home. Thank you, Lord Supreme Cloud. Yin Yang was stunned, speechless for a moment. He then heard the old bastard say with gratitude, you've saved my life, I'll remember it with my entire being. He then turned his head and said affectionately, Madam, it's been hard on you all this time. How long have I been in a coma? The corners of Yun Yang's lips twitched, deeply feeling that the word moral integrity was getting further and further away from this old man. This was what it meant to have one's worldview destroyed, one's moral integrity shattered, and one's virtue gone. He heard the old mistress say in a gratified tone, that's more like it. The old woman approached, her eyes brimming with tears of emotion, but she tried her best to keep them from falling. Her voice trembled as she said, thank you, Lord Supreme Cloud. We will never forget your kindness. There's no need for this, there's no need for this. Now that old Marshal has woken up, everything is fine. I shall take my leave now, Yun Yang said as he turned to leave. Wait. Qiu Jianhan pushed himself up and looked at him with bright eyes. After a while, he asked in a trembling voice, then, how was the battle at the Fortress of Resilience? The old man's eyes were filled with worry. We won. Han Sanhe is dead. Yin Yang left as soon as he finished his words, turning into a cloud of smoke and disappearing quickly. He had fled in a flustered manner. He really couldn't stay any longer. Only Qiu Jinhan's delighted laughter could be heard behind him. The old mistress had been suppressing her emotions for a long time and was finally able to let them out. Shangguan family of generals. When Yin Yang found Shangguan Lingxiu in the middle of the night, she was, understandably, shocked. What was he trying to do, sneaking into a beauty's room in the middle of the night? Shangguan Lingxiu's neck was flushed. Why are you here? Could this fellow have found out about Lingxi and my promise, and couldn't hold it in anymore? This is too embarrassing, but, if he insists, should I just half-heartedly comply with him? Oh my God, how could I have such a shameless thought, but, what if he gets angry? Yin Yang obviously did not realize the depth of a girl's thoughts as he stared at Shangguan Lingxiu's pretty face curiously. Why is your face so red? I'm here to take care of old Mistress Shangguan. Didn't I promise you that I'll help her nurse her health? My cultivation base has improved since the last time we parted. It should be of some help. You know who I am. How could you come in broad daylight? Shangguan Lingxiu's thumping heart returned to normal immediately. Her shyness vanished, replaced by a burning rage that made her want to kick this fellow out. She said through gritted teeth, Lord Supreme Cloud is a thoughtful person indeed, please follow me. Just as Sister Lingxi had said, this fellow was indeed a fool. Why can't I be as skilled as Sister Lingxi? Why can't I teach him a lesson from head to toe? Forget it, I'd rather not have that power. It would mean that I can't get close to him at the same time. That would be a sin. All right. Why are you angry all of a sudden? Who's offended you? The fool has offended me. I'm not angry, I'm not angry. Shangguan Lingxiu forced a smile through gritted teeth. I'm so pissed off. It's good that you're not angry. You don't have to bring me over. Just point me in a direction and I'll go there myself. It's inconvenient for you to bring me along. It's already so late, over there. The one with the light on. Shangguan Lingxiu pointed. When Yin Yang turned to look, he heard a loud bang behind him as a door slammed shut. If Yin Yang had come any closer, he could have flattened her straight nose. Lord Supreme Cloud, who loved to look good, would never have been able to accept such an outcome. Lord Supreme Cloud was dumbfounded, grumbling inwardly, what's going on? What's going on? Previously at the Yun residence, he was clearly very gentle. I was secretly delighted that under his valiant appearance, there was only gentleness and care, completely different from a certain someone. Why did his temper become so bad after returning home? I really don't understand. Or perhaps I don't understand women. I'm a virgin, I really don't understand women. Yin Yang shook his head and sighed. Women are such strange creatures. He disappeared with a swoosh. The process of treating old Mistress Shangguan was smooth as well, even smoother than waking up old Marshal Qiu. The old mistress had fallen into a state of drowsiness due to her poor physical condition. Yin Yang did not have to spend much effort to make the old mistress fall into a deep slumber. Everything that happened after that went smoothly and easily. As Yin Yang circulated the endless divine art and supplemented it with Emmy's air of vitality, all the blocked meridians had been cleared after only one round in the old mistress meridians. It was slightly more troublesome to hide a portion of the air of vitality in the old mistress body throughout the entire treatment. After all, if it were to be used directly, the old mistress' white hair would turn black. Not only would it become a supernatural event, it would also draw unwanted attention. It would not be good if the air of vitality was hidden within the old mistress' body and used slowly. This was the way to cure the root of the problem, and it was more in line with a word that was accepted by ordinary people: miracle. It was a miracle that one's life was on the brink of death, but it was only due to one's luck. At the end of one's life, one's white hair would turn black in the night, and one's life would shine brightly. It was not something that could be attained by any one person. It would definitely attract the covetous eyes of countless others. Done, done, done. Yin Yang snuck into Shangguan Lingxiu's room once again. Shangguan Lingxiu muttered a few curses under her breath and was ready to sleep. However, just as she took off her clothes and crawled into bed, a certain someone came in again. She was dumbfounded. Are you done? Chapter 678. It's done. Yin Yang boasted excitedly, I'm here to tell you not to worry anymore. You don't have to worry about old mistress's health for at least 10 years. Shangguan Lingxiu pulled the blanket up and covered her head with it as well. She was both embarrassed and embarrassed. Why was this foe here again? This is worse than the last time when I didn't even take off my clothes. But now, in my current state, should I be worried or should I not be worried? She did not hear a single word that Yin Yang had said. How did you? Shangguan Lingxiu covered her entire body but felt that something was amiss. She pulled the blanket away and wrapped it around herself, revealing only her head as she looked at Yin Yang, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. You really? Yin Yang obviously did not expect to see such a scene when they met again. He was dumbfounded and only said after a while, feeling wronged, Why did you go to sleep without waiting for my message? This was Yin Yang's honest words. He really thought that Shangguan Lingxiu would definitely wait for the results of his treatment here. Who would have thought that she would not wait at all, stripping off her clothes and going to bed, stripping, this. Can you blame me for this? Lord Supreme Cloud was indeed wronged. Shangguan Lingxiu felt even more wronged. Gritting her teeth, she growled in a low voice, What is this? Is there a need to inform me specifically? If I didn't know that Supreme Cloud was you, I would, of course, wait for the results respectfully. Now that I know that you're Supreme Cloud, I'll definitely go to your residence tomorrow. What can't we talk about then? Don't you know that I'll be there? Sigh. Yin Yang stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. It was only then that he felt that he had been too presumptuous in this matter. These days, Shangguan Lingxiu would go to the residence of King Yun every day. It had almost become a routine. Other than Supreme Cloud, Yin Yang was more important to her. She had promised to keep an eye on old mistress's condition, so there was no need to rush, looking at Shangguan Lingxiu who was wrapped in the blanket, looking at him in embarrassment, annoyance, embarrassment, and helplessness. Yin Yang coughed a few times, feeling speechless. He did not know why, but he blurted out, Sister Lingxiu, you actually look pretty good in bed. Shangguan Lingxiu's head was covered, her body burning with embarrassment. What kind of nonsense was this bastard spouting? I'm leaving. Just as the words left his mouth, Yin Yang immediately realized that he had said the wrong thing. With a swoosh, he made his escape. By the time Shangguan Lingxiu plucked up her courage to lift her blanket to settle the score with him, Yin Yang was already gone. Judging by his pace, he might have already reached old Grand Commandant Fang's residence by now. Although he was embarrassed, it was better to finish what he had to do tonight in one go. Since he couldn't get rid of the biggest threat according to the plan, he had to get rid of some other hidden dangers. It was best to get rid of them as soon as possible. However, with this interruption, Wu Ying's suffocation seemed to have dissipated considerably. As Yin Yang sped in the wind, he actually began to daydream. TSK, I have to say. Once Sister Lingxiu takes off her clothes, she's pretty feminine. Fortunately, he didn't say these words on the spot. Otherwise, he would probably be beaten into a pig's head. A blood-red pig's head. The next day, when Ji Lingxi saw Shangguan Lingxiu, she was surprised to see how tired she looked. Her dark circles were especially striking, and she seemed to be in low spirits. Sometimes, she would even sit in a daze, looking listless and listless. Sister Lingxiu, what's wrong? Ji Lingxi asked curiously, didn't you sleep well last night? No, I didn't sleep well. Cough, cough. Of course she hadn't slept well. She had already fallen asleep, but the person she liked had barged into her room. Her heart had been thumping all the way until this morning. How could she have fallen asleep when she had gone through all sorts of scenarios? Why? Ji Lingxi sat beside Shangguan Lingxiu and said, I should be the one who didn't sleep well. You don't know this, but I haven't had a good night's sleep these past few days. Sister Lingxiu, what can't you figure out? Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but blush as she recalled what had happened last night. She bit her red lips lightly and sighed subconsciously. Idiot. Once the words left her mouth, she felt that something was amiss. How could such words be said so casually? Why did they come out of her mouth so easily? Would everything not be exposed if she said it out loud? As expected, alarm bells rang in Ji Lingxi's heart as she perked up. What is it? Did this idiot offend you? When did it happen? What happened? Tell me in detail. Shangguan Lingxiu blushed as she shook her head. No. No matter how Ji Lingxi asked, Shangguan Lingxiu refused to confess. This was not something that could be discussed in detail. Ji Lingxi grew increasingly suspicious. Biting her red lips, she thought to herself, could it be that this fellow, actually? Humph. She stomped her foot angrily even though she already had a plan in mind when she thought about it. With a loud bang, the ground shook. Ji Lingxi stood up angrily and kicked Yun Yang's door open. She rubbed her palms together and said, Yun Yang, come, let's learn from each other. We can't miss out on sparring every day. A wail of anguish came from inside. Yin Yang had nothing to say about it. He improved so quickly and grew so much that he was confident that no one would be able to surpass him in the future. He looked down on everyone and looked down on everyone. He climbed from almost no cultivation all the way to Dao Realm Stage 4. Although it wasn't enough to compete with the top experts in the world, there were few who could match him. As for people of the same generation, as for those of the same generation, excluding that monster, Ji Lingxi. She did not need to cultivate at all. After sleeping for a few nights, she had already ascended to the pinnacle of Dao Realm. Who was he supposed to reason with? She dragged him along every day, calling it a practice session, but in reality, she was just punching a sandbag. Moreover, her attacks were neither gentle nor forceful. Every punch that landed on flesh was the lightest result. Occasionally, when his moves were ingenious and successful, he would be half dead from the recoil of the red light. That sour feeling was worse than being beaten up. I can't live like this anymore. Yin Yang sighed in despair. If there was anything worse, it would be today, where he was forced to practice with Ji Lingxi continuously. Well, it was more like being beaten up. It was also this day that coincided with the Empire of Yutong's celebration. When His Majesty was about to attend the morning assembly, he suddenly saw two familiar faces. The civil and military officials were overjoyed when they saw them. These two people were the two pillars of the Empire of Yutong's military, Old Marshal Qiu and Old Grand Commandant Fang. These two old men were hale and hearty, walking as if they were flying. Not only did they not look old or weak, they looked as healthy as they were in their prime. Chapter 679. The civil and military officials in the imperial court were dumbfounded. Didn't they say that the two of them were already at the end of their lifespans? One was suffering for his life, and the other was already unconscious. How could they both appear here? Moreover, they were in high spirits. This was definitely not the final radiance of the setting sun. Even the so-called final radiance of the setting sun wouldn't have this kind of energy, qi, and spirit, all right? The mysteriousness of the incident had taken everyone by surprise, exclaiming that a miracle had happened. As the crowd exclaimed in awe, they wanted to ask about the reason. This was a living dead person. The effect of reviving the dead was astounding. It was not a coincidence that two people had been saved in one go. It must have been the help of an expert. How could they be satisfied if they did not ask about it? Qiu Jianhan felt that he could not answer and was about to come up with some excuse to cover it up, but old Grand Commandant Feng spoke first. Old Grand Commandant Feng continued. This old official is surprised as well. Old Grand Commandant Feng looked perplexed. Recently, my spirit has been deteriorating. My days and nights are drowsy, like I'm waking up from a dream. I feel that I don't have much time left. Last night was the same as usual, but somehow, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was surprised to find that my body was as light as a youth. I felt uncomfortable all over. Your Majesty, the officials, and Brother Nian are surprised by my condition, but this old man doesn't understand what has happened either. I didn't want to attend the imperial court today, but I'm filled with doubts about my condition. I wanted to ask if anyone knows what's going on. Qiu Jianhan continued smoothly, this old official's condition is similar, but I'm even more perplexed than Old Man Feng. Old Man Feng is at most drowsy throughout the day and night, but this old man has been living dead all this time. Old Man Feng doesn't know the reason, of course, I'm even more perplexed. All in all, it's strange. It's fine if you want to ask this old man, but you have to ask old Grand Commandant Feng first. What does this old man know as a living dead? Go ask the living. A certain old gangster had even scratched his head in bewilderment, looking perplexed. His acting skills and phrasing were superb. He was indeed the leader of Yutong's 3 rogues. His Majesty could see that old Grand Commandant Feng really did not understand. However, when he saw Qiu Jianhan scratching his head innocently, His Majesty felt his heart sink. The joy he felt when he saw that the old man had woken up safely almost vanished into thin air and turned into a heart attack. His only thought was to kick this old hooligan, who was too good at acting, who was sighing and scratching his head with his fingers, out of the main hall. He had a blank expression on his face, but in reality, he knew better than anyone else. Since you don't know, can you not speak in such an arrogant tone? Pooh. You don't know either. I'll be a fool to believe you. When the morning assembly ended, His Majesty the Emperor kept Qiu Jianhan to interrogate him. Qiu Jianhan was still bewildered. I really don't know, Your Majesty. You should ask old Grand Commandant Feng about this. This old official is still very muddle-headed until now. I probably had a dream when I was sleepy. I dreamed of that and that and that and that. Your Majesty, take a guess. Those old things are living a good life now. Damn, they can live so well even as ghosts. I'm so envious. TSK, tisk, did someone save me? Did someone really save me? F*ck, I was actually saved. Then who is my savior? Since Your Majesty has said so, you must know. You must tell me. The grace of saving my life should be repaid with gushes of spring. I must repay the favor. Facing such an old hooligan, His Majesty got nothing after questioning him for an hour. Instead, he listened to the old hooligan's story of him wandering the underworld for half a day. In the end, the person asking the questions gradually became the one being interrogated. In the end, His Majesty could not take it anymore. He pointed a finger at the door and said, "Scram. This official shall take his leave." The old hooligan was gone in a flash. He had run away at top speed. Could it be that a person who has died once would be twice as thick-skinned? His Majesty was unsure of the question. He fumed for a long time with a dark expression before he finally scolded, "Old man. Do you really think I can't guess who it is if you don't tell me?" The entire Shangguan clan was also very happy. When the great ancestor woke up in the morning, he suddenly felt a lot more energetic. After trying it out a few times, he could actually walk as if he was flying. Surprise! He then realized that many of the discomfort and old ailments in his body seemed to be gone. Surprise! He then realized that even the cultivation base that he could not use seemed to have recovered. Even more surprise. His back was straightened, his ears were no longer deaf, his vision was not blurry, his legs were healed. Finally, he tried leaping several feet. Seeing that old mistress had recovered so much, the entire Shangguan family of generals cheered thunderously, elated and delighted. God bless the family of generals. Old mistress took one last look before asking, "Where's Lingxiu?" "She's gone to the residence of Yun." "Should we call her back?" Old mistress pondered for a moment before saying, "There's no need. This girl, she's been through a lot all these years." She walked slowly to the door of the ancestral hall and looked at the memorial tablets inside, murmuring, after a few more days, "If this old one's body is still as good as it is today, then this old one will still be the one to support the family of generals. When the time comes, this old one will invite Yun Xiaoyao over and settle the marriage between Lingxiu and Yun Yang." All the women of the Shangguan family were overjoyed. Everyone had witnessed Shangguan Lingxiu's efforts all these years. Who would not be heartbroken? A beauty in her prime could only stay at home all her life because of the burden of her family. Now, she could see hope. The bitterness was over and the sweetness was beginning. God bless us. Shangguan Lingxiu's mother knelt before the ancestral tablet and kowtowed respectfully. Ancestors bless us. Bless my Xiu, to be happy and to find someone to rely on. It was night time. Yin Yang's miserable days had finally come to an end. It was not that Ji Lingxi could not move him or that she was being kind, it was because something that Yun Yang had planned for a long time had finally happened. In a restaurant that was neither high nor low class. The four noble young masters of spring, summer, autumn, and winter were drinking with their guards, in high spirits. There were a few tables nearby that were filled with people of the martial world. Seeing these fellows talking so arrogantly, they curled their lips discreetly, but no one was there to dampen their spirits. First, the four popinjays were not ordinary young masters of noble families from their attire alone. Furthermore, they had many guards by their side, they did not look like they were to be trifled with. This was only secondary. The most important thing was that although the four great debauches still had the title of debauchee, their strength was no longer ordinary. Any one of them had the extraordinary strength of a Jianghu expert. How could ordinary Jianghu people dare to provoke them? Just as the few of them were in high spirits, someone suddenly fell into the restaurant. He landed in front of Dong Tianlong. Chapter 680. The person who had fallen in was an old man who was covered in wounds. His body was drenched in blood and flesh. He picked himself up immediately after falling in and hugged Dong Tianlong's thigh, crying out, "Young master, save me." Dong Tianlong hollered, "Don't touch me. I've just changed my clothes." 3 to 4 silhouettes came from afar. "Where do you think you're going?" The old man let out a strange cry and quickly got up again, leaping out of the window and disappearing in the blink of an eye. His movement skill was extraordinary. The pursuers were still in hot pursuit, leaping out of the window one after another. Dong Tianlong stood up and cursed, F***ck. This young master is untainted by the mortal world, but the mortal world will taint me. I've only come out for a drink and I've actually been splashed with blood. This is simply... As he spoke, he tidied himself up, growing increasingly frustrated. That old bastard, why did he smear my blood all over me? How can I drink now? This young master is a particular person. What's this? As he spoke, he took out a tattered item from his clothes. It seemed to be some kind of fur. F***ck, what's this? Dong Tianlong lifted the piece of fur up and observed it carefully. What the F***ck is this smell on it? It's been chopped into pieces. F***ck, why are there 2 pieces? Let me see. F***ck, are these 2 pieces actually connected? There seems to be something on it. What is this? Strange. As he said so, Chun Wanfeng and the rest perked up and stepped forward. What is it? What is it? Say what is it? The guards of the four noble young masters knew that something was amiss, but they could not stop him in time. Too many people had seen Dong Tianlong examining the rag in the air. Everyone paled when they saw it happen. My young master. Can you have some martial world experience? It's obvious that the old man who's being hunted knows that he can't escape, so he stuffed it into your arms. It's fine that you left just like that. Why did you take it out? For an expert to be hunted down like this, how could the things he gave him be ordinary? You'll get yourself into big trouble. Young master, keep it quickly. One of the guards said in a low voice, this thing, what's wrong with that? Look at all of you. Dong Tianlong guffawed. By the looks of it, it's only 1 or 2 pieces of treasure map at most, and it's not even complete, only 2 pieces, just a part of it. With this young master's current status, cultivation, and strength, would an ordinary treasure map even enter my eyes? This young master doesn't have anything else but money, ability, and ability. The other 3 young masters roared with laughter. They were extremely savage. Well said. We have plenty of money and great abilities. We are all experts. With the current strength of the 4 great hedonists, this wasn't an exaggeration. It was the truth. A few of the guards shook their heads and stomped their feet, their faces full of anxiety. Young master. Although your cultivation has soared, your eyesight hasn't improved at all. This is clearly a sign of great trouble. He leaned closer and said, if it were an ordinary treasure map, how could there be so many experts just now trying to steal it? Those people just now were all Dao realm cultivators. Any one of them was a rare sight in the Jianghu, and was an overlord-level existence. Dong Tianlong was taken aback. What did you say? You're saying, this thing, is actually a rare treasure? The kind that will cause great trouble? The eyes of the martial world people at the other tables had already lit up upon hearing the commotion, each of them perking up their ears to listen. Yes, young master, this matter must not be taken lightly. The guard was so anxious that he was starting to spout nonsense. Dong Tianlong's eyes darted around as he said, this matter is easy to deal with. That old bastard wants to frame your father? Then I'll let this old fellow go for wool and lose the rice he used to lure the chicken. He'll lose everything and get nothing. Bring me the fire. Dong Tianlong was gleeful. Let's burn it directly. Let's see who's the one who feels the pain in the end. How dare you plot against me? You're wrong. It had to be said that Dong Tianlong's plan was somewhat reasonable. I don't know what it is, but I'll burn it. What can you do to me if I burn it in front of everyone's eyes? Completely ignoring the dissuasion, Dong Tianlong went ahead with his plan. Without a second word, he lit the fire and the fire blazed brightly. Dong Tianlong used his knife to pick up the 2 pieces of the treasure map and place them into the fire without hesitation. Then, it burned for half a day. What kind of fur is this? Dong Tianlong was amazed. It's King not afraid of fire. It's quite rare. The guards of the 4 noble families had just felt a little better, but now their expressions turned even uglier. No matter how rare a treasure map was, it would only be worthy if one had sufficient ability. Without sufficient ability, it would only be the root of trouble. While it was a pity to burn it down, it had to be said that it was the best way to solve the problem in front of everyone. But, a fur that was not afraid of fire. What kind of fur was that? Everyone seemed to have only heard of one thing, a legend. In a distant legend, only the fur of various divine beasts was not afraid of fire. Dragon skin, Qilin skin and so on, could not be destroyed by fire. However, what kind of treasure map would be made using the fur of divine beasts? The leader of the guards was so anxious that his heart almost leaped out of his throat. Young master, let's go quickly. Dong Tianlong also realized that he had gotten himself into big trouble and said, it's all right, it's all right. I have the treasured saber that boss gave me. It's more important to get rid of this threat now. If we really bring it back, we'll only bring more trouble to ourselves. As he spoke, he placed it on the table and drew his saber. It had to be said that experience was indeed useful. Although Dong Tianlung's response was simple and brutal, it was still the best way to deal with the current situation. Of course, the premise was that he could really use his saber to deal with the two pieces of fur. Plop, 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 Dong Tianlung used all his strength to hack and slash more than 300 times. However, when he picked it up to take a look, there was not even a single mark left on it. F***ck, it's actually a treasure map fragment that's impervious to weapons and water and fire. Everyone was dumbfounded. What kind of great secret did it contain that such a precious piece of fur was actually needed to be recorded? At this moment, the four noble young masters' eyes lit up. For such a good item, even if it was a little trouble, it seemed to be worth it. Suddenly, a long laugh came from the side. Why go through so much trouble? Since young master doesn't want this trouble, just give it to me. A black shadow suddenly dashed over like lightning, grabbing the two pieces of the treasure map and retreating in a flash while laughing. How dare you? You're courting death. Put it down. In an instant, the four noble young masters and the 16 guards struck together, causing a storm to break out. Chapter 681. Countless gusts of wind intertwined. The man laughed and took the blow head-on, charging out like a whirlwind. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, he jumped out of the window hastily. His reflexes were swift and his cultivation base was impressive. After all, he had only spat out a mouthful of blood when he faced the combined forces of the four noble young masters and 20 others. Unexpectedly, just as the robber jumped out of the restaurant, he saw a flash of saber light and an eerie voice said, "Give it to you? Are you even worthy?" Faced with the sudden saber light, the man who had just charged out did not even have time to scream before his head was chopped off. Then, a ghostly silhouette flashed and was already hundreds of feet away. The speed of his movement was rare. Then, a few people leaped into the air, saber light and sword energy crisscrossing. Put down the treasure. In the blink of an eye, everyone on the scene had disappeared, already far away. Whistling sounds could be heard from afar as various signals and rockets were fired into the sky. Bam, 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 Dong Tianlung held his hands in a daze, dumbstruck. His face was pale and his gaze dull. After a long time, he said with a tearful face, "What should I do? I seem to have gotten myself into big trouble." Everyone sighed in unison. Recalling how this child had taken the only treasure map of a mythical beast hide in the world, raised it up, set it on fire, and slashed it with a saber, although they knew that it was the right thing to do, they could not help cursing inwardly, F***ck your mother, you don't do this even if you want to die. The treasure is already in your arms, but you still dare to show it off. Your father has never seen such an idiot in my life. On the way back, the four noble young masters were dejected while the 16 guards were like walking corpses. No matter what, the news of the treasure map of two mythical beast hides in Enchanting City spread like it had grown wings, spreading throughout the martial world in a short amount of time. It was also on that night that Yun Yang found out about it. Then, Yun Xiaoyao issued an order. Seal off Enchanting City. From now on, only entry is allowed. This decision was absolutely correct. You can bring the treasure map out, but don't stay in Enchanting City to wreak havoc. At the same time, reinforce the security. Prepare for war. A series of orders were issued like thunder and lightning. However, everyone knew that another catastrophe had arrived. The epicenter was still Enchanting City, the capital of Yutong. Boss, it's done. Dong Tianlung was no longer as anxious as he had been in the restaurant earlier. He was beaming with joy. Don't you worry about our work. It's flawless. Yin Yang rolled his eyes. Done. Do I need you to tell me that? The entire country knew about it. I knew it. Moreover, this is just a script. Even the details of the lines are designed by me. If you make any more mistakes, it's your problem, okay? What's there to be proud of? The first step is complete. Begin the second step immediately. Act according to the established plan. On the second day, Dong Tianlang invited his guests to a different restaurant. This restaurant might not be considered the most high class in Tiantang City, but it was definitely the restaurant with the largest floor space. Spring Flower and Autumn Moon House. Those who attended the meeting today were almost all of Tiantang City's younger generation. There were few who were left out. Other than the four noble young masters, there was also the great crown prince Yun, who was seated at the head of the table. Below him were the two young princes of the royal family, as well as young Master Ma, young Master Qian, young Master Wang, young Master Niu, who had not appeared for a long time, as well as certain young masters who were making their debut. All in all, there were 15 to 16 people seated at each of the 10 large tables. The food was filled to the brim. Dong Tianlang sat at the head of the table, looking like he had lost his parents. The guards of the major clans had long since guarded every window, door, roof, and even every blind spot. To put it nicely, it was a matter of great importance, so it must be kept a secret. However, the group of guards looked at each other in dismay. They had the urge to curse out loud in their hearts. F***ck your grandpa, secrecy. You've invited 200 people and there are even more guards around. What secrecy is there to talk about? Secrecy my A**s. Only when one person knows about it can it be considered a secret. If there were 2 people who knew about it, the possibility of a secret being leaked would soar to 80%. If there were 3 people who knew about it, it would basically mean that the whole world knew about it. Now that there were more than 300 people, how could they still think of keeping it a secret? Ha ha ha, what's going on here today? One of the young masters was anxious. Just as the crowd sat down, he took the lead and asked, "What's going on? You've called all the brothers here. Is there something big going on?" If it were the 4 noble young masters of the past, they would have had some reputation, but it would have been infamy and infamy. The prodigal sons of the martial world's aristocratic families could not even be mentioned in public. They would not even enter the eyes of Yutang's noble young masters. They were on 2 different levels, 2 different worlds. However, the 4 noble young masters of today not only had the meritorious deeds of bravely going to the Fortress of Resilience and bathed in blood on the battlefield, they also possessed formidable abilities that allowed them to look down on the so-called 10th perfection legendary experts. Their reputation was no longer what it used to be. Otherwise, Dong Tianlang's invitation might not have been given face. Silence. Someone beside him reminded him, "What are you so anxious about? Can't you see that young Master Yun is here too? He hasn't even spoken yet. Who do you think you are?" Cough. Cough. Yun Yang coughed. It was this cough that silenced the crowd immediately. Everyone straightened their backs and looked at Yun Yang. This was the power of a person's reputation. Even though there were 2 royal princes sitting here, no one dared to compare themselves to this young Master Yun. Young Master Yun's reputation was truly renowned throughout the world, shaking the nations of Tianxian. Did they not see how the 3rd prince was severely injured by young Master Yun and almost turned into an idiot? Did His Majesty not say anything? Moreover, the crown prince did not seem to gain any advantage from young Master Yun either. In Tiantang City, not listening to young Master Yun meant that one was an idiot, a fool, and a wise man would not do so. There are 2 main reasons for gathering everyone here today. One of them is Dong Tianlang's personal matter, young Master Dong Tianlang. He needs everyone's help, to lend a helping hand. This matter of his is really an undeserved calamity. Sigh, it's just that he's a little dumb, a little silly, and a little dumb. Other than that, there's nothing wrong with him. Yin Yang sighed and looked at Dong Tianlang with disappointment. Why don't you say it yourself? Tell me, how can you always be related to such rare matters? Dong Tianlang stood up with a long face, his face a little green, looking like he was about to cry at any time. Dear brothers, the young masters who claimed to be knowledgeable felt chills running down their spines upon hearing his words. Their gazes were strange as goosebumps rose all over their bodies. F***ck. What was he trying to do? Why did he even use the word dear? Just say it, what was he trying to do? Chapter 682. Brothers, you must help this little brother this time. Dong Tianleng wiped his face as he spoke of his heartbreak, tears streaming down his cheeks. Snot and tears streamed down his face. There was no trace of his previous unruly demeanor. I can't live on anymore. This mustard was King awesome. Everyone was shocked by this scene, and they all muttered in their hearts, could it be that this guy has gone crazy? Sigh, it's a long story. Dong Tianleng sobbed, it's probably because this brother has been in the limelight recently and attracted the jealousy of others. Although it's said that one is mediocre to not be envied, but, sigh, just yesterday I was schemed against by someone with ulterior motives. 2 treasure maps, just a matter of time, sigh, as he spoke, his face was already tearful, full of reluctance to speak. He was a proper actor. What happened after that? The crowd was obviously more nosy. Everyone knew what had happened to this fellow yesterday. All of them were full of admiration for this guy's reaction. How stupid was he? I didn't think much of it at first, but after I went back to ask around, I found out that I've gotten myself into big trouble this time. Dong Tianleng thumped his chest and stomped his feet. The fur that I touched yesterday was impenetrable, impervious to fire and water. It seems to be the fur of a mythical beast, perhaps even a dragon's skin, tisk. Gasps of surprise rang out. Everyone here is also an experienced and knowledgeable person, so you should have heard that since the beginning of time in our profound sky continent, including official and unofficial history, novels, and biographies. There was only one treasure map that was made from dragon skin. Dong Tianleng's face was filled with the regret of missing out on a treasure that was already in his arms. How precious. How rare. I actually. He could not continue speaking as tears streamed down his cheeks. The young master's curiosity was piqued. What kind of treasure map is it? Why does it sound like Brother Dong knows a lot about the details? Hurry up and share such explosive news. Yes. You should at least tell us the whole story if you want us to help. What exactly do you want us to help with? How? What's going on? If you don't tell us, how are we supposed to intervene? How are we supposed to intervene? It won't be good if we accidentally help. For a time, there were many different opinions. Dong Tianleng took a moment to calm himself down. After a while, he finally said in a choked voice, now that things have come to this, I have no choice but to put aside my pride and seek help from my brothers in order to protect myself. There's no harm in me telling everyone what I know, but please don't leave me in the lurch. I only found out after I went back that the dragon hide treasure map was said to have originated from one of the few immortals who had appeared in our continent many years ago. That immortal was known as the 17th Master of the Abyss. 17th Master of the Abyss. Hiss, hiss hiss hiss, hiss 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 hiss, gasps could be heard. Everyone's expression suddenly turned solemn. So the owner of the Dragonhide treasure map was actually the 17th Master of the Abyss? In that case, it wouldn't be strange to use the dragon skin to cover the entire treasure map. This was a legendary figure that everyone looked up to. Compared to the 17th Master of the Abyss, the so-called number 1 expert, number 1 swordsman, and so on were not even worth mentioning. After the Age of Gods, it was a unique period where civilization changed and the continent was overturned. It was the first time the continent had appeared and humans were born. Countless traces of the earlier era had been overturned by the sea and buried in this land. On a certain month and year, a person suddenly appeared out of nowhere and called himself the 17th Master of the Abyss. This was the beginning of his legend. The so-called beginning of a legend was probably referring to this 17th Master of the Abyss. No one knew where he came from, but ever since he came out, he was known as the 17th. There was a record of someone asking him, "Why are you called the 17th?" The 17th master said, "Before me, there were 16 other seniors who came out from our side. All of them were already listed as immortals and had become great figures like the rulers of heaven and earth. As a junior who ranks 17th, my greatest wish in this life is to catch up to the footsteps of my predecessors. How would I dare to take up a senior's title?" The most important information revealed by this sentence was that there were 16 others before the 17th master, such as the first master of the abyss, the 11th master of the abyss, and so on. These young masters had all ascended to the heavens without exception, achieving immortality. Once this fact was revealed, the entire continent was shaken several times over. Of course, the premise of this fact was that the 17th master of the abyss was invincible from the moment he appeared. He traversed the entire Tianxian continent without a rival. Later on, he traveled to the boundless sea, the snowy mountains, and the boundless forest. All of them were smooth sailing, and he could do as he pleased. Another result of his freedom was that countless rare and exotic beasts died under his hands. It seemed that there were many powerful species that were not able to reproduce, and thus no longer existed in the world. In the end, there was really no one who could stand up to him. A certain young master let out a long sigh and said, "Among the heroes of the world, there is actually no one who can stand up to me. Life is so lonely and miserable. Forget it, I should find another place to train myself." However, the Tianxian continent is full of heroes. How can it be devoid of talents? 17th, I have slain a dragon today and specially made a dragon-hide treasure map to be scattered under the heavens. If anyone is fated to obtain it, they can inherit my legacy. I hope that after many years, we can meet again in the 9 heavens. After saying that, he grabbed a dragon from the boundless ocean and slashed it with his sword. He took a piece of dragon skin from its neck and drew a map. After thinking for a while, he tore it into 6 pieces and blew at them to scatter them in all directions of mystic sky. After doing all this, the 17th master of the abyss said, "First young master and the other seniors, 17th is coming." In a flash, he leaped into the clouds. At this time, thunder and lightning roared, and the sky darkened. Vaguely, a path to the heavens could be seen flashing in the sky. As the 17th master leaped up, the path to the heavens disappeared. From then on, the 17th master was no longer seen in the world. The above was the truth. No matter how long the history, this was still a legacy that could not be ignored. However, how could such a legendary figure not arouse wild and fanciful thoughts? How could the item of inheritance not be coveted and coveted by others? However, that dragon skin treasure map had never been seen for so many years. Actually, it was understandable that anyone who obtained a piece of it would definitely treasure it in secret and absolutely be unwilling to reveal any information about it to others. It had been hundreds of thousands of years since this ancient legend. In all these years, the 6 pieces of the dragon-hide treasure map had never appeared in the world. Moreover, because there were no more unparalleled experts like the 17th master, it gradually became a legend that only existed in legends. By now, almost everyone had forgotten about it. Even if there was the shock of yesterday, not many people would connect it to the real thing. The so-called skin of a mythical beast, or rather, the skin of a dragon, only existed in legends. However, in today's world, who had actually seen a dragon? Or even other divine beasts? But now, because of one person. A great person. A great idiot. He actually cut it with a knife and burned it in front of everyone's eyes, proving that there really was a certain kind of skin in this world that was impervious to weapons and fire. It was definitely a good thing. This was, without a doubt, a great idiot. This person had obtained 2 pieces of the treasure map and was being chased by people with ulterior motives. He had stuffed it into his arms to divert attention, but it was only a temporary measure. He had thought that with his experience and vision, he would definitely not be able to see through it. He had planned to retrieve it secretly in the future. However, This great idiot had revealed it to the public in order to vent his anger due to his usual foppish behavior. What was even more coincidental was that this gigantic idiot had quite a bit of cultivation base, insight, and wealth. First, he disdainfully wanted to destroy the treasure map to take revenge on the person who had resorted to expedient measures. Then, he grew fearful of the treasure map's impenetrable material and directly used a E-grade divine weapon to forcefully destroy it. However, his countermeasure was equivalent to repeatedly showing that this treasure map was the legendary Dragonhide treasure map. In the end, it had inevitably been snatched away by someone who coveted it. This process was like someone had stuffed a check that could be cashed in half a world's worth of wealth into your arms. Then, you took it out in public to check if it was real. After confirming that it was real, it was then snatched away by someone else. Hearing Dong Tianlong mention the 17th Master of the Abyss, everyone recalled it at once. At once, the gazes they gave Dong Tianlong were extremely complicated. Your father has never admired an idiot in this life, but your father must admire this idiot in front of me. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.